And so, okay, we're live. Okay, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about, have some brief remarks on the recent presidential debate between Trump and Biden. And then we're going to go back to our recent symposium on the crisis of knowledge and talk about what we achieved in that symposium and how it in some ways resets or sets up the political and ideological direction of the free school, but also the Year of Baldwin and the political imperative we're trying to achieve. But I also just wanted to welcome Eugene, who's from our Parkway Central Branch group from this past Thursday.
Hi, everybody.
I'm really happy with you. Okay, I'll first turn it to Doc/Tony, who will.
Or AKA.
Okay, Doc.
Briefing was unavoidable that we talk about this debate because of the crisis that was set off by it. All pundits, all observers, all political historians, all historians of the presidency and presidential campaigns, everybody is pretty much unanimous that no sitting or presidential candidate had ever formed like Joe Biden did. This had never been done. People have had bad debates, and if you listen to mainstream media, they talk about the bad debates and how winning candidates came back from them. That's it. I don't know how accurate it is, but that's the narrative. I think but it's so disastrous that pretty much there's no coming back from it. I don't care what they say, Biden and his candidacy, even his presidency, cannot reverse what was done on Thursday. Some of us looked at it together with people, Arab Americans from the abandoned Biden movement. And it was really good to be with them, or to be with free school people too. It's better to look at it with people because there was a lot to enjoy and laugh about. I think, but you saw a man, and we kind of knew most of this, but I don't think anyone knew how profound the cognitive deterioration is, and how even the best drugs, and I'm saying pharmaceuticals, I'm not talking illegals now, although that might be a part of the therapy, but they couldn't get him right. He had this far off look in his eyes. When he was standing there, his mouth was half partially open, he just looked like a cadaver, like somebody that they had taken out of the coffin and stood up. The guy looked terrible. This was not a matter of age. This was a matter of cognitive deterioration. For upwards of 80 million people to have looked at this for an hour and a half was both shocking, it was disturbing, but it was angering for many people, especially Democrats, who had been told by the leaders of the Democratic Party that this is a vibrant guy in meetings, he's on top of his game, he is a critical thinker. I'm trying not to laugh. I mean, he's a critical thinker. He is directing all major decisions and so on. because then the question becomes, well, if he's incapable of running the government, who is running the government? And that's still a big question. And why are the Democrats / the ruling elite pushing this man? And why is the mainstream media constantly lying about his mental state? These are all big questions. And not only for the people, but for, as they call them, the donor class / ruling who are saying that we can't fund this, because they're investors, they're capitalists. They don't want to make investments that they cannot get an expected return on. That's the way they think. It's rational choice thinking. For them, this is a matter of how can we fund this campaign. Now, this is a big question for the Biden campaign, because in the last month or so, Trump has surpassed them in the amount of money that each campaign has in the bank. People, the RNC, the Trump campaign, 232 million in the bank, and the Biden campaign has about 212 million. So the Biden campaign was looking to do some serious fundraising over the summer. And this crash and burn thing that happened on Thursday cut into the confidence of the donors who were expected to make up for the deficit with the Trump campaign, but even to surpass him going into the fall, because they know that they have to flood the airwaves and social media with positive images of Biden, because you can't show him for too long doing anything. But Thursday was a complete and utter disaster, unlike, and this is what we have to underline, unlike anything that had ever been seen. Nothing like this had ever been seen. And they tried to cover it up with, oh, I had a cold. It's not a cold. People in this state of health have trouble breathing. Right. So their voice is not strong. And how do you explain that look? If I sat up here and was looking, y'all would call the emergency to take me away. I mean, the guy just looking off in and then mixing up what he's saying. They asked him a question about abortion. He talks about immigration. They asked him something else. He said, I did away with Medicare. I killed. The guy was just thrown off. So, well, the political crisis, and it is a political crisis, and it's a political crisis of the ruling class. Not just of his candidacy, because he was supposed to represent normality, stability, that and at least in foreign affairs, that the quote allies, another way of saying mainly the white nations, could feel elected. The war in Ukraine continues. Sports wars, and it would be the military containment of China and North Korea, by the way, which is another way of saying that they felt assured that Biden would, and the Biden administration would continue the war policies of his administration. And by the way, this is the most war administration of all time. I've lived through Vietnam. I always say that. There, even then, war in Vietnam and bombs and yada, 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 nothing close to this administration. What we call brinksmanship, where you take the world to the brink of thermonuclear war and then supposedly step back, ha ha ha. But sometimes you can't step back. And now the adversaries of the United States ever. What is being formed, BRIC, other Russia, North Korea, China, Iran. I mean, with all due respect, anybody with an ounce of sense, I don't want to mess with all them people, because they're armed, as the song said, they're armed and extremely dangerous, and they don't play, But anyway, I won't get into the conflict of civilizations, and the West can't win, will not win. Okay, so they felt this guy represented that. Even if he was impaired, what he symbolized was more important than actually what he was. But we saw what he was, and in the end, we saw that he could not win. The New York Times, Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, all are leading over the last 2 or 3 days with the same message. We got to replace this guy. And I'll just end on this. I felt for some time that they would have to yank him by June. And I based it on his inability to get his poll numbers up. Consistently, his favorabilities are in the mid to maybe high 30s. His unfavorabilities are in the mid to upper 50s. In other words, he's 20 points underwater. He is far more unfavorable than favorable. And then there are structural issues, putting aside his age, but that's a factor, such as immigration. And that's a policy. Open borders is the neoliberal policy going back to Reagan. Then in this environment, there are political motives for it as well, to up the number of voters in places like Arizona and New Mexico, Democratic. But really to lower the wage level, to attack the working class at the level of those people who have the least education, have the poorest jobs, live in the poorest neighborhoods. These are jobs which immigrants, especially from South America, and we're talking about illegal immigrants, opening borders, come on in and go to Chicago, go to Philadelphia, go to New York, because you don't have to speak English, you don't have to have any particular skills. And, because you are legal, you'll work for anything and accept any conditions because you'll have to. Well, that began to create a reaction, as you know, and such. The other thing is inflation, which can be articulated in many ways, a tax upon working people, but it is an attack upon the standard of life of working people. There are many causes and contributory factors to inflation. I don't want to go into all of them, but certainly inflation in its generic sense means inflating the money supply. And that goes back to COVID, with trillions of dollars over a short period of time, being funneled into the economy. You inflate the money supply, you set off a set of events, which leads to price inflation while wages don't go up. And ordinary people are suffering.
Mm.
Things are at the market are double what they were. You know, and you can't bring all these economists on talking about, well, we got inflation, it's coming down for the third month. Yeah, but not at the grocery store. You know, not if you're paying utility bills like water and electricity, and we can go on and on. So people are poorer in a nation that was already poor. The other thing is the so-called cultural wars, which many people, and I think rightfully so, as an attack upon them. You know, you basically was saying in these cultural wars, which was a way of reconfiguring the Democratic coalition. We got Black people, we got most women, or got 50% of women, but we got 90% of Black people. We got most Latinos. Now we're going to bring in young people who are the cultural vanguard and their issues. But they overplayed it. Most people said, well, why don't you give us a chance to discuss these things before you make a curriculum in my elementary school based upon cultural war issues? You know, by the way, I don't think most people are anti-gay or even anti-gay marriage per se. But what most people are is you from a high and you intellectual elitists who have utter contempt for us poor people in rural Georgia or North Philadelphia telling us the way we must live. They don't want to hear that, you know? So there's a reaction to it. All of these theories of race essentiality or race or whatever, race identity politics, you know, it was just an abuse of people, of ordinary people. And you told them to shut up and you canceled them and you treated them with utter contempt. So all of this produced a reaction, but they could hold it together if they could sell the Democratic Party and sell Biden as liberal, as fighting for your rights, as fighting for a more equitable society, more inclusiveness, if you could sell that. And you sell that as a way of not addressing the substantive questions of the life world of working people and poor people. Well, it backfired all on Thursday. All. And so now, and I thought, by the way, I thought they were going to have to get somebody moved by June. I thought it would be a drip, 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 you know, that death by 1,000 cuts. But it was just an immediate collapse. But isn't that the way radical change often occurs? You know, you would want it to be incremental. You build up, until you have what Stephen Gould called a punctuated equilibrium moment. And you go from quantitative changes to a qualitative change. But it doesn't usually happen that way. It's usually a precipitous collapse. And this is what happened. I'll just end on this. The ripple effect is for the whole political system. It's now, at least for my part, my view, Biden cannot win. If they pull him, the Democrats lose. With him, they lose. They're in a no-win situation at this point, which means the ruling class and their war policies and their neoliberal economic policies are in a crisis. They cannot guarantee that Trump will do anything that they want him to do. It's apparent that Trump is predisposed to Putin and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un more than to Macron in France or whoever's going to be the new prime minister of England or Schultz in Germany. In other words, he is not oriented on Europe. Thus, he will not support, and they know it, a NATO or American war against Russia in Ukraine. Okay? I know the Chinese are very cautious when it comes to him, as they should be. I think Putin would probably see him in terms of Russia's interests more positive than Biden. Biden has provoked this war. I think that I don't know how the North Koreans or Iranians would see him, but he is known for talking a lot of trash and then reversing himself, just like he did with Kim Jong Un. Oh, I'm going to blow you all off the map. I'm going to, and then 2 weeks later, oh, I just received a love letter from Kim Jong Un. We're the best of friends. Well, why did you go to the UN with that bullshit? But anyway, so he is unpredictable and unreliable from the standpoint of the ruling class. But more than that, that he has unleashed political forces in the country that they cannot control. And in some ways, last point, I don't think it's hyperbolic or reckless to even suggest that we're in, well, first of all, the Gramscian situation, an interregnum, a period between two periods, between an old and a new period, an interregnum. But then, in some ways, the country looks like it could be entering a pre-revolutionary situation. Now, I'm not telling you, that doesn't mean that people are going to be taking to guns in the street and, all of that. No, but something that looks like a gradual undermining of the rule of the ruling class. And people maybe, we don't know, demanding a wider and deeper people's democracy and people's control over things that affect their lives, and taking all of the decisions about the country out of the hands of the rich and the powerful and the military. A growing criticism of the military-industrial complex, such things as a peace economy in a nation that is more anti-war today than it's ever been. The other possibility is a civil war, pre-Civil War. Now, pre-Civil War would be something like Marx and Engels talked about in the Communist Manifesto, a crisis that cannot be resolved, and hence the ruin of all classes type of phenomenon. But we just don't know. We do know that the old is dying. And I think Biden symbolized that. That's what we saw on Thursday. A death and an inability to revive the old. And then you read all of these newspapers, the disintegration of this coalition. So I think we have to continue with what we've been doing. I think our talk about a social system. Just want to say one small thing. This might fit into your presentation. In talking about social system last week, I did not talk about one concept that we have to include, concept of complexity. As a way of understanding social systems. And when we say complexity, we're not ruling out dialectics, we're not ruling out mediations, but we are looking at something wider and deeper than just a crisis of a mode of production. A lot of other questions will have to be addressed, such as, well, where does this lead the class struggle? Right. Which then, for me, throws the question to the person asking the question, well, what do you understand as the class struggle? Have we entered a period of the all humanity struggle is modernity, as um, um, as we talked about it, colored modernity. What does that look like? Can I just say one quick thing, just on China? This I think was a great mistake of Mao and the Gang of Four, ultimately, to say that after the revolution, a new class struggle had to be waged against traitors to the revolution. I think so much of what they call traitors and the new class struggle in China were fictionalized. And that's why I think Xi Jinping is very, very important. The question of China as a question of the total people. And to understand the Chinese modernity, the Chinese social system as it is being created and built, you have to have a concept of complexity. And that's the same for us. In crisis, complexity. We have to understand and thus democracy as an all people's project, not just a quote class project, working class project. And that is rooted in a assessment of the people and where the people as humanity are at this moment in human history. So I'll stop there.
Did you want to have a discussion about what you just said, or move to science?
Whatever you think.
What do you think?
I guess we can talk about this for a little while. I guess we can talk about
Versus how much? Yeah.
But I wanted to say just one short thing, and I appreciate how you broke it down, Doc. When I was watching it, first of all, even watching something like this, the debate, and realizing that perhaps the whole world will see this and see where America stands, it was an overwhelming sensation, because I feel like, in the kind of work that Free School is engaged in, to try and formulate what the revolutionary path forward will look like. I don't know if this is right, but it often feels like victories are small in number. They come not very often. You have an analysis of what's going to happen and what has to happen, but it doesn't always play out exactly like that. But I felt like this for me was one of those occasions where, you just have that immediate confirmation of everything that we had been saying and working for, and the clear way it was basically communicated to all the world, and yeah, I think it was important for me as an experience.
So last Saturday after free school, Corva, Eddie, and I went to the Trump rally at Sumter University, more out of a kind of sociological curiosity. And I mean, you talked about it a bit in your interview with Don the Bar, but yeah, it was really interesting. And I think we were still trying to make sense of it afterwards, coming out, because I know that you guys also went to the Trump rally in New Jersey too.
And that
Oh, you guys were.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
it's hot.
Yeah.
Earlier.
But from what we were seeing, a lot of the kind of implicit but at times explicit purpose of that rally in North Philly was Trump reaching out to Black Philadelphia. That was very clear. And it was very interesting to observe the dynamics that were playing out in that context, because our estimate was, I don't know what you guys saw, but our estimate was it was maybe like 15 to 20% Black people in the audience. And a lot of them were, it was like Black men, solo, couples, and then like a few like families, like some women and stuff. But yeah, it was really interesting because they opened the rally itself with a prayer from a Black minister from like a local Baptist church, I think it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just really interesting to like see the crowd. Because I think, you know, there's a larger question about the Trump movement and like where it's headed. And I think in a lot of ways, like even because you know, we had also like sat through preschool and then we sat through another like 3 hours of just like waiting basically before Trump spoke, and so we were kind of tired. But in a lot of ways, I feel like Trump was more disciplined, I think, in the debate with Biden. I think with the rally, he feels a lot more comfortable and he can kind of talk for a long time. And, you know, the crowd also loves it. So, you know, he kind of has that license. But I don't know, yeah, just from what we were seeing, it was like a lot of the, because, you know, with a lot of people who show up for Trump rallies, you're not clear if they're coming from like Philadelphia proper, from the suburbs, from other places. But I think a lot of, especially the Black people who came, to us, or at least to me, it seemed like they were coming directly just from the like from North Philly itself, or just from the city, and they were the most likely to also like just because you know a lot of the Trump people have like Trump gear on, you know, like T-shirts and everything, but it was mostly the Black people that we were seeing who were almost like the least likely to like be like the super diehard Trump fans, and were more just there out of like I don't know some curiosity or something. But yeah, I don't know. I was trying to make sense of that as it was happening in the afterwards too. Like, what does it mean? Because I think there's also there is, I think, like a larger, like a looming question for the Trump movement around like white specifically. And I think that was really apparent. Like, there was an incident where like this Black woman was there and she started like yelling and protesting, and like they had to escort her out of the auditorium, and like the people were I don't know, people were yelling at her and it just felt really racist and really weird. And so I don't know, I just feel like there's like this larger question because also I think the big thing like with the Trump movement too is like it's so dominated by his personality, by Trump's personality in particular. And I think it's a larger question of what's gonna happen to like the Trump movement. Like one, like, it's beyond him as an individual. Because all of these people, they come, you know, like obviously they'll probably vote for the Trump like picks for like, you know, I think it was like Dave McCormick.
Yeah.
Who was like their senator candidate. But like they're really there for Trump. And I think Trump means something to these people that can't be underestimated. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like my overall feeling with it is that like the character of the movement is not fascist in the way that the mainstream media portrays it, but there are a lot of it's something that's also like fluid and it's really interesting because I think there's almost like the undercurrent of something for a lot of people were almost confused of like why do we need to reach out to Black people? And that was like an undercurrent like, kind of tension that I felt in the audience. And at the same time, I feel like the big thing that like Trump really has as this strong hand is like immigration. And you know, he also brought up like I feel like he brought that up. Like those are the two big things that he could talk. Basically immigration. But yeah, I don't know. It was really interesting to like be there. The crowd was super like even though it was like a really long event, they're very animated for Trump, and in a way that like it's impossible to imagine anyone being that excited for Biden, especially after the debate.
Can I add to that a little bit? Yeah, we have been to 3, and each time we go, we like interview people and we record it and post it online for people to learn. And what I've learned so far is that like MAGA is not a coherent ideology at all. It's not a coherent ideology. I wouldn't even call it an ideology at all. And What people have told us personally is that they view MAGA as a populist revolt against the ruling class. And I quote someone said that. People also said, people call it a MAGA revolution. I just think like everyone knows something's wrong, but there's no one to truly guide them or to, yeah, I guess like Trump is inadequate himself. We all know that. And a lot of people seemed worried about the compromises he would make as president. But one thing that surprised us the most was that everybody is pretty much unanimously anti-war. Even though we asked the people about Israel specifically, and people would say, "Oh, well, I support Israel, but I don't want to send them any more money. Like, I don't see what that invasion has to do with us." And it's like, I would get other people like, "Yeah, I support Israel too, but our people are suffering. You know, we need to prioritize our people first." And yeah, trying to figure out where to run with that, I guess, is our task.
Yeah. Well, actually, this is interesting because I think the reason why Trump is interesting is because, well, first of all, I agree that I think Joe Biden, first of all, I think Joe Biden is useful for whoever the unnamed people who are behind him. Like, there's clearly a whole, like, clearly there are people behind Joe Biden who, like, are calling the shots. It's not Joe Biden. And in some ways, they, like, you know, someone made a joke that he was like a Manchurian candidate, which is kind of true in some ways. But I don't really know the movie. I've never seen the movie, so maybe the parallel's not right. But I do think what's interesting about Trump is that Trump is not completely dictated by his movement, and the movement is, and but at the same time, Trump is moved or related to like the people in this movement. But at the same time, I think what's becoming more important is this quote unquote MAGA movement, which is, I think, a lot of like white people. I think Trump is more cognizant that he's going to have to not just be the face of the MAGA movement, but actually has to, he's seeing for himself that there's a whole swath of discontented American people, including Black people, not just white people, and that Trump is more like willing to basically like address the fact that it's a whole American, it's a whole bunch of American people, not just white people who have suffered. And I think that's why Trump made a choice. I don't think it was even totally his campaign. I think it was Trump's choice to go to the Bronx. I thought it was really interesting that basically he went to South Bronx, he went to Philly and somewhere else, I forget, where it's like he purposely chose minority or Black places to go to. And I think that conscientiousness of a whole discontented people, which is not just white, but in fact, most like a lot of Black people and brown people, like Latinos and Black people, and I guess growing numbers of Asians, is something I think that Trump is more aware than the quote unquote, than the white MAGA supporters themselves. And that's something I think that the white MAGA supporters are going to have to like follow Trump, if that makes sense. Like, I think Trump is more aware of the coalition of discontented more than the MAGA, quote unquote, MAGA movement people are. And I almost feel like that's also tied to this concrete demand of peace, or at least anti-war. Maybe it's not pro-peace yet, but it's instead anti-war. Because like when Trump at the debate was talking about NATO and stuff, I thought it was interesting that like it is crazy to have someone who was president and is running for president basically be like, fuck NATO. Like he was like, why I am not tied to NATO. I don't need to be tied to NATO. I don't have to be allegiant to NATO. If NATO is not doing anything, if these European countries aren't doing anything for us, then why should I be in this? Like the fact that Trump doesn't feel tied to even this concept of Europe, I think is important because it opens him up to be independent. And I feel like that is what makes him actually much more. I actually think that Trump in some ways is becoming very futuristic. Like he's more willing to not be tied to a status quo than like than obviously Joe Biden, but like it's actually probably in his own campaign. And I think that's kind of deep. And it's something that I think the MAGA movement is not as like, I think the white people in Trump's movement is not completely like conscious of it yet. And maybe it's just because it hasn't been said, but I think it's something that Trump is aware of, where he's like, he doesn't use this language, but like him being like, I don't even see America as part of Europe. Like, I don't see America as tied to Europe is significant, because I think the problem with some of the populist narrative is, I kind of feel like white people in the MAGA movement think that they're emulating the 1776 revolution. And I think that's a problem, because like, there's an assumption that you're, first of all, like, it's an assuming inheriting a like revolution that doesn't really make sense in the current paradigm of the way the world is set up, because we're not at that time anymore. And actually the big fight on the world stage is this thing of like, does the West get to dominate the world, or is in fact different Western countries, but in particular America, will America join the rest of world humanity, which is predominantly like darker humanity, nations that were former colonized, nations that want there to be a different world order where you don't have to be completely dictated by the whims and desires and interests of Western nations. Like, Trump, I think, is much more willing to be independent and say like, yeah, I don't feel tied to the status quo. I'm down for something else. Not sure what the else is yet. And oh shit, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, but I feel like the problem is that the white people in the MAGA movement think that they're emulating 1776 against the government that they think is just like the British from back in the day, when actually it's not. In some ways, it's not really just a fight against like what you think is the new British, or like a government that doesn't represent you. But I think the problem is they don't want to pick up they don't want to pick up like what's actually a struggle or fight against like an old world order or imperialism, or like whatever you want to call it, which means that you would have to like see yourself as picking up like the third American Revolution. Like, you don't go back to 1776, at least even see the Civil War as part of that like tradition. And then especially like the civil rights movement, like, you have to see yourself as not like, I'm not a populist in the 1776 sense. I'm a populist in the sense of like, I'm here trying to like even undermine the moral standards and values that allow human beings to make war policy decisions. Like, I feel like I feel like that's part of the blind spot of the white MAGA movement. Yeah. And in some ways, I think Trump, I guess maybe it's a dialectic, but the dialectical thing of how much Trump is moved by his MAGA movement versus how much I think Trump feels loyal to he is loyal to his people, like to like ordinary people. But I think Trump is more aware of the fact that, quote unquote, his people is like a wide swath of discontented Americans, including a huge section of the Black population, and especially Black men, because like, yesterday, Jeremiah, Neri, and I met this Black woman who works at a salon in downtown city, and she was like a recently converted Muslim woman because her husband's Muslim and he's a SEPTA driver. And she was much more hesitant towards Trump than her husband. She was like, my husband thinks he's an all right guy. And she was like, I'm just not sure. And I was like, do you feel like actually, would you say like more Black men than Black women are like cool down with Trump? And she was like, that's interesting. She's like, yeah, I think so. And it is. It's a very interesting thing. But anyways, I feel like all the sociological evidence is showing that like more and more where Trump is headed is like how allegiant will not just Trump be, but like, well, yeah, I feel like a big question for Trump himself will be how much will he like stand strong independently against all the people around him who will try to whisper to him to continue a imperialist or war policy, which Biden was much easier to control. Like Biden, the Democratic Party, Biden's easier to control.
I get briefly onto that too. It's like when we were talking to people, they were intuitively saying that they wanted to defund Israel or defund wars, and Trump himself didn't say that. So it's interesting that all the MAGA people just intuitively believe that we shouldn't be funding Ukraine, we shouldn't be funding Israel, and that we should be funding our own country. And I think that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, one of the things that did stand out is Trump is, for good or bad, some of the things that he said, you don't really know if he means them. But one of the things that he did mean was that, if I was president, the war in Gaza would not have happened. The war in Ukraine would not have happened. And I think that there's a difference between saying that it wouldn't have happened versus I would have stopped it once it started.
Yeah.
Um, and that actually, because I was thinking about what you said about people being anti-war versus pro-peace. I think that that's a start, like being anti-war, and this transformation of being anti-war to becoming actually pro-peace is a more spiritual transformation, and it is what we're talking about when we talk about Baldwinian love being a sort of foundation of how people start to think about the rest of the world, and the fact that Trump is opening up to his base. I think that it's a start. It's a start. It's a beginning because I think as we've discussed, this life world of Black people based on love, you can only get it from them. The spiritual transformation of being anti-war, becoming pro-peace can only happen through that. So I think I take it very positively that he's opening up to his Black voter base, and he's separate, as you say, from his white MAGA base in dealing with a certain section. I didn't go to I couldn't go to the rally, but I was reading about how Trump talked about, Philadelphia has certain that is what they retire. Yeah, are disproportionately affected. And I think it takes a certain amount of mental prowess to realize that and say that. Yeah, I think I view it positively. I know that it is that he has said a lot of things about Israel and stopping the student protest movements, blah blah blah. But like I said, the thing about Trump is you never really know what he's going to do till he does it, and that really does make him very unpredictable and unreliable to be controlled by the community.
Well, I guess what I wanted to ask, because I would like to understand it better, is how Trump's leadership, like ideologically, has transformed since 2020, and then also the ideology of like that, yeah, like the MAGA movement. And I ask because like I don't follow electoral politics as closely, but it was also always hard for me to keep a pulse on what's happening with Trump and his movement because it just doesn't show up on like my algorithms and stuff. So I haven't heard much about it at all since 2020. And so what I would like to know is like what crystallization is different, if at all, in 2024. What is he going harder on or looser?
I don't think he's changed at all.
Yeah.
Well, because my sense is it's almost like that's the dialectical move, like the contradictory move is that Trump has become he has become the Republican.
Yeah.
He has become the Republican.
Yeah.
And I think that is also one of his contradictions because, for instance, like with the Ukraine aid, he was the one who was actually responsible for pushing through a lot of the Ukraine aid because he was able to convince Mike Johnson to do it as a loan rather than pure aid, which is also kind of BS. And it's yeah, there is no GOP without Trump. And at the same time, I think Trump has also become hard edged, I think, in terms of I don't know, it's a lot more aggressive almost in terms of I don't give a shit what they're gonna do to me. I'm gonna keep going. And I feel but some things have also stayed pretty consistent in his messaging and stuff. But I just feel there are parallel movements that I see happen with Trump, and then I do think the big thing is that he the biggest thing is that he's what we've been talking about is him reaching out to like non-white people, basically. Because, also, like, in the debate, there was, like, this moment when he was, like, the illegal immigrants are taking Black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And, there's one way to react to that, where you're like, oh, he thinks that Black people are only doing, like, lower class jobs. And so I think, like, some Democrats, I mean, it's like, it's very easy for the Democrats to be like, oh, that's racist. But actually, what he's saying is that, like, it is true. Like, it's happening in Philadelphia. Like, a lot of, like, working class jobs that Black people usually have taken on, like, have been taken by, like, immigrants or undocumented migrants and stuff like that. And he was even saying that, like, Hispanic jobs are being taken by undocumented immigrants too. And I think the other thing is, like, part of, I mean, I'm curious what you guys felt, but, like, even especially the Black speakers at the Trump rally that we went to, it was really, to me, it felt really clear that it was almost like they were like, ideologically the strongest and also organizationally the strongest. Because there's like this minister who spoke and gave the opening prayer. And then, like, honestly, I feel like it was pretty good. And then there was another, like, Black woman who was, like, a single mother of, like, 2 kids, who was, like, the leading, like, the captain of, like, Trump volunteers in, like, Pennsylvania or something. I forget what her exact title.
Trump Force 47.
Yeah, it's like Trump Force or something. And but yeah, it was really interesting because she, she also was like, oh yeah, Trump supported the HBCUs, like, he supported criminal justice reform, although I don't know what that reform was. But, like, it was really interesting because, like, we've talked about Black social system, how Black people, because of their historically constituted, are very, like, predisposed towards, like, social organization, toward movement and stuff like that. And I think, like, the fact that the captain of, like, Trump Force, whatever, in the state of Pennsylvania is, like, a Black woman who, yeah, like, I don't know, she just seemed really, like, it just felt like something that was, like, very, like, organic in some ways. And yeah, so I feel like the Trump movement it has had to evolve, but it's also, like, that's also, like, where the contradictions, I think, have opened up. And I my difficulty is, like, I don't trust Trump either. And I feel like the big thing, like, also, like, the kind of dialectical move between Trump and then the movement is that I feel like the biggest push from the MAGA movement is, like, don't sell out. I feel like that's the biggest thing is, like, don't sell out to the establishment. But I feel like that is kind of like Trump's weakness is that I think he is kind of, like, narcissistic. And if people just, like, tell him that he's doing the right thing, like, that's why he brought in all those, like, I don't know, all those, like, small people with him into the first administration. Who then he had to, like, then fire. But it's like, like, I don't think Trump is also, like, I don't know, but yeah, I feel like that's part of the, like, underlying dynamic. But it was really interesting to see, like, that, like, aspect of it come through at the rally.
One of the things, the dynamics and fluidity of the moment politically, I don't think there's ever been a mainstream candidate, a candidate from one of the major parties that has come under this kind of attack. Never has it been anything like this. And you always have to ask the question, why? If he were just another part of the ruling elite, why is he coming under such severe attack? And I think, although we might not know everything, I think certain things are very apparent. They would not attack him if he were not perceived by them to be a threat to their policies. And here I'm talking first and foremost the policies of what we call Pax Americana, or the American Empire. They want to hold that together at all costs. They cannot survive, I would say, even as a ruling class in this country without a global empire, which is why they always talk about our allies. And when they say our allies, they're talking first and foremost about the white nations. I mean, it's so very apparent. And so, you have to read, I think for me, you have to read below the line. You have to see a subtext, not just what is said, but other dynamics. For example, if Trump um, diminishes the role of European nations, i.e., white nations, in the in U.S. foreign policy. Let us just take that. Has he not then weakened not only the hegemony of the former colonial powers, the major capitalist nations, but has he not thereby weakened the white supremacist world alliance? It seems to me so. If he goes towards China, and I know in his speech at Temple, and whenever he speaks highly of Xi Jinping, Putin, and Kim Jong Un. I mean, okay, let's say he could speak highly of Putin and Xi Jinping, but Kim Jong Un, the as from the standpoint of U.S. rhetoric, the devil of all devils, the worst of the worst. And for Trump to speak positively of them, even while acknowledging in his understanding that these are not allies, they are competitors, but they are led by super competent people. Whereas Europe is led by incompetence. Europe is a basket case dependent upon the United States to defend them and spend all of all of this time. I think that's such an unipolar world, anti-US hegemony narrative. I think as I read that, I don't think the US ruling elite can survive without an empire, without a dollar that is dominant in the world, without a number of nations, be it Saudi Arabia or Israel or I don't know, wherever, who are prepared to do the biddings of the United States. Well, if that falls apart, if Trump is, and we don't know, I agree with you, Jerry, you just don't know all of the pressures upon him, the threats against him, and so on. But if he accepts the inevitability of BRICS plus 30 now, not just BRICS plus, BRICS plus, well, now they're saying, I heard somewhere where they said that BRICS might replace the United Nations. Certainly, BRICS will replace the so-called G7, and here, of course, India, China, all right, already you got 3 billion, there you go. 3 billion people to start the discussion out with. And just a small thing, I was reading somewhere where of the 10, I don't know whether you guys saw this, of the 10 top scientific research centers, 7 of them are Chinese. And did you see that, Shantanu? Oh, you said, I know I got it from somebody that's smart. And Shantanu said a couple weeks ago that China had discovered a cure for type 2 diabetes. That here you have this super scientific, highly disciplined society. So, I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to say that Asia is the ascendant and the West is in descendant. So Trump realizes what anyone would realize, that the future is in Asia. And while he wants to compete with China, which I don't think is a winning proposition, this thing of tariffs on China, I think they hurt, just like tariffs on Russia hurt Europe more than they hurt Russia. I think this will hurt the United States economy more than the Chinese economy. By the way, I think the Chinese economy is sanction proof. They looked at what happened to Russia, and they have made appropriate decisions to protect their economy. The other thing is, I think that the BRICS alliance, or BRICS plus 30, makes all of the members of BRICS sanction proof. Because for the sanctions to work, the US dollar must be hegemonic. So one of the things of BRICS is to reduce or eliminate dependence upon the US dollar, and to go really, which is not mentioned enough, to a goal-based or natural resource-based currency, which then makes all the sense then for Saudi Arabia to be a major player in BRICS, and for Saudi Arabia and Iran to reach a rapprochement, a détente, rather than war, which only serves the interests of the West, and in particular of the United States. You unite all the oil-producing countries in the world, it's to the benefit of every oil-producing country. Last point. And there was a deal made, some people say in 1971, but I think it was before that the Saudi ruling regime decided that oil would only be traded in dollars, which meant that every nation who needed to import oil had to have dollars, which gave the dollar an extraordinary position in the world economy. No nation had ever had that, which gave the United States a tremendous capacity to control other nations' economies, to control the world economy. Just one last point. And I heard Douglas McGregor and others say about this. What happens when the interest on the US debt, the US sovereign debt, is more than what is paid out for the US military? Now, some people have said this is all a sign of an empire about to implode. When the interest payments annually on the sovereign debt is more than that nation can pay in military spending. How all of that works, I can't say, I don't know. But they have said it happened to the Dutch, it happened to the Spanish, it happened to the British. That the onset of an absolute decline is when their debt is just out of control. And that's the case here. I think the sovereign debt of the United States is over 100% of the gross national income. We got an economy of about $23 trillion, I think that's what it is, and a sovereign debt. We're not talking about just the debt of the government, which is close to $30 trillion. And the interest on the debt is $1 trillion a year. We're talking about numbers that were unimaginable 10 years ago. The magnitude of this and the masses of people, they know something is profoundly wrong. They aren't wrong about this. Like Gannon, you and Ryan, with y'all's interviews with people at these MAGA rallies, I mean, to me, it says it all. But by the way, Trump understands that to win, though he's leading in the polls, to win in November, he has to weaken the Democratic coalition, and he is going for it at its Achilles heel. Black people withdraw from it, it's game over. I think that's why I think Biden loses Pennsylvania, because the black vote in Philadelphia is completely disenchanted.
Yeah, adding to that, I mean, it really stood out to me the way that he sought to connect with the Black and Hispanic vote in this event, because there was no pandering in any way at all. He was he had brought Black leadership. He had mentioned he had the was it a Emmanuel Baptist Church?
Yes.
Yeah, it was, the pastor of the Emmanuel Baptist Church, and had the Trump Force 47 movement, and you know, that comment of all immigrants are taking black and Hispanic jobs. It was, to me, it was saying, one, you know, I see what's going on and I see your pain, because actually, you know, I you know, fraternize, have friends with the Hispanic people of Philadelphia, which are mostly illegal immigrants, to be honest. And the ones that have been here longer are stressed about the ones that are just getting here, taking their jobs. That's how bad it is. And so I imagine black people are not doing any better. But the way that he sought to connect with the black people of Philadelphia, I saw more as, I want to engage with you, but I'm not going to pander to you. I'm going to give my message to you. I'm going to tell you what I'm about. And if that can that speaks to you, then run with me. And overwhelmingly, I think that number is increasing with people that are open to it. And then something particular about the Trump movement that I guess, as articulated in that in-person event at Temple, that I'm still trying to make sense of. As you mentioned, he was not as disciplined or as sharp during the Trump rally there as he was during the debate on the national stage. Part of me at the beginning felt, or at the end of it, immediately felt slightly disappointed, because I wanted him to go on like, you know, because Trump could run his mouth, right? And so I expected him to kind of run his mouth and more or less focus on anti-war, as well as I guess what he would call it, maybe during the swamp, this attack to kind of dismantle certain forces of the ruling elite. So, and he did mention it, but it wasn't like the main focus. So I'm trying to make sense of that as it relates possibly to the voter base in Pennsylvania, what he believes might be more on their mind. This not just Trump nationally, and it's Trump in Philly, and Trump in the greater Pennsylvania area. So I have a little bit more questions and answers, but I do see that that position still holds, as Anna mentioned it. And I guess one of the I guess still limitations that I feel that's our strong hand. That's why we have purpose. I still see the desire or interest in, like, let's say, anti-war, for example, to be more self-interest, illogical. Oh, this doesn't actually serve me, which is true. Versus like what we see, at least what I feel more closer to and relate to more easily, which would be something like the students, which is a moral dimension. This is not right. We cannot allow ourselves to live like this, even if we have everything to gain doing it. So that element, maybe that will evolve. Maybe that's something that can come more from the people, especially with engaging with the Black vote. Overall, upon further reflection, I was more pleased with it.
Did you remember when he said the positive things about Cornel West and Jill Stein? He said they were good people, but he was not positive about RFK.
Yeah.
He said he's not a good person. Remember? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder how that affects his base. You know, here we have a white movement, white in its majority, pretty much white. And here you have the leader of it saying Cornel West is this, at the same time he attacks communists, Marxists, and fascists in the same, you know, it's a bitch's brew, to use Miles Davis's it's rhetorical. He's rhetorical and often hyperbolic, but that comes off as unhinged to the elite policy wonks who are university educated at the best universities and who cannot communicate with grassroots people, but ordinary people take hyperbole as for what it is. You know, he's talking over the top because that's the way he talks, or rhetorical language. I mean, they would say the same thing, by the way. I know you find about Louis Farrakhan. He doesn't talk in the language of the elite, and he's not trying to talk to them or appeal to them. And I think that's the same with Trump. He has made it this far, talking in ambiguities and hyperbole and the other thing, and somehow it relates to the people he wants to relate to. And it's it's though he's saying, if you have a grievance against the ruling class, we have a space for you in this movement. You don't have to remain silent. I am your voice. I am your revenge. I am your get back. That's what he's saying. And I can tell you, it's very interesting. Black folk hear that because they're used to that. That kind of, you know, you got a grievance, you don't like what's going on, you know, come to the Million Man March. You know what I'm saying? Or come to Mosque 12, because we feel the same way. And we're not going to question your grievance. And I think that open door policy, that's why it's hard. And then it's I think, you know, the study of rhetoric, the study of public oration, be it in the church, be it in the mosque, be it in populist movements, there's a common thread, a common dynamic where you don't speak in specifics, you speak in gestures, you speak over the top, and the leader asserts himself as a big person, a huge person, a fearless person who will speak as he wants to speak. And I'm not speaking to them, I'm speaking to you. And I think, because I listened to the speech, and I said to Jeremiah that no, he doesn't talk policy when and he never does, it never has. But I felt he was a masterful politician because I looked at the way he related to and spoke to his audience and joked with as though he was just speaking to a small room, but he was speaking to a big audience of 10,000 people. These are political skills that the ruling class can only undermine through money, advertisement, and propaganda. Biden can't compete with it. Well, Gavin Newsom can. Barack Obama couldn't and can. They can't because they speak to the people as though the people are below them. Trump doesn't speak to the people that way. You know what I'm saying? So he is seen as not adhering to the script. He doesn't talk like a white man. He talks like a white man, but a low class white man. He doesn't speak like an elite white man. He doesn't approach the people in that way. So that's what I would say. I don't know how you feel about that.
I wanted to add one thing to it. I mean, going back to Michelle's question also, and then what Eddie was bringing up about the students. I think this is something that I've been thinking about a lot is, has the Democratic Party lost the youth?
Yes.
It's obviously closer to having lost the youth than it ever has been before.
I would agree with that.
With what happened. And even at the Trump rally, I was actually surprised to see a lot of young people who did not fit the description you would hear of, the MAGA movement. Hipsters and the interesting thing is, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but I don't feel like Trump campaigns to the youth like that. Like, I don't think he has the language, whatever the language he's using in any way targets specifically young people like that. I think but it was interesting that there were so many young people at that rally and enthusiastic, screaming things throughout. And I've been trying to make sense of this because on the flip side of it, in say the Department of Physics, at Penn, which is where I have to do my penance every week. There's still that, ideological control, that mechanism going on where it is like, oh, okay, you're not happy with what's happening with Palestine. It's because of the Democratic Party, but you don't have an option. Your only option is still the Democratic Party. It's still Biden, because you don't know what's going to happen if Trump gets elected. So there's still that element, definitely. And I hear it every day. I hear it from professors. I hear it from, the more vocal, colleagues of mine and so on. And I feel like there's a battle going on here, which in some ways, for the first time, is overwhelmingly tilted towards Democratic Party actually losing the youth. But yeah.
This thing of Trump saying, well, Black people can identify with me because I've been attacked by the legal system. Well, that's true. I mean, it does, it's, you have to see the negatives and positives in situations like this. People who have suffered at the hands of the legal system will identify with a person who has also been attacked by the legal system. There is truth to that. Does that mean that every Black person? No. But I mean, on the lower scale of the working class, I can almost guarantee it. Especially, this is why Black men are a unique category politically in this whole equation. Who were the ones that were the targets of the Crime and Anti-Terrorism Act of 1994, the Bill Clinton crime bill that put 1/3 of young Black men in prison? Can you imagine? It devastated. Because a lot of economic decisions that families make is based upon two people, two incomes. Now you take all the young men away. You are disabling a community and impoverishing it. We ain't forgot that. We haven't forgotten that, what it did. So the question of, well, the Black people say, well, you're attacking him, the legal system, you got all these charges on him, and that's what you did to us. So he's right about that. So Al Sharpton will come on television, oh, he's stereotyping Black people. No, he's not. It's a fact. There are multiple reasons. Can I just say, I was at the demonstration outside. I think the Blackness leadership class or the Black political class know that they have lost the Black masses. They know it. And to only have 100 people, when I got there, it was about 50. And I would say about 1/3 of them I knew personally. Yeah, I did. Because they were from local 332 of the laborers union, which is damn near all Black union. So, I'm walking up there with Dwight, so, they come and, they had their shirts on, all Black guys. And so, hey man, what's happening? Everybody fist bumped and everything. Yeah, we're just coming from this rep. Now I know all of them got paid to come, but I know them. I know even if they were there, the negative position about Trump that the Black political class would require of them is not there. They don't feel it like that. Because if you take the laborers local, if you take the longshoremen's local, these are jobs where people who have done jail time, and you know how you have to fill out a job application in most places. Well, where they work, you don't have to fill out a job application saying, have you ever done a prison sentence? Have you ever been convicted of? So you don't have to fill that out. So you just go there and sign up and work. And I know so many Black men who have been in prison I can see it. I know how you look after you done, from the time you was 20 up to the time you was 30 something, you've been in prison. I could tell it, the way you walk, the different ways of things, and they don't want to hear Sherelle Park or anybody else telling them that I'm making it better for you and you vote for Biden and you're going to do better. They don't want to hear it. They might not vote for Trump, but they're not going to vote. I don't know what that makes sense.
I wanted to add to Michelle's question about how Trump has evolved. In that a lot of the Black or Latino people who are going to vote or support Trump this time around, there was all this hysteria in 2016 about, oh, Trump is the end of democracy, Trump is the end of this country, I'm going to move to Canada. And none of that came true. And so people are going to be like, especially the abandoned Biden people, the world didn't just collapse because of 4 years of Trump. And then the other thing I wanted to say was the Trump supporters have become a lot less extrajudicial, meaning in 2016, 2015, there was a lot of violence at Trump rallies, and some of it was like provoked by outsiders or people getting in people's faces. But you don't see that time around. I remember there was one guy at a Trump rally in 2016, he like elbowed a black guy on his way out. And so you don't see that. And the other thing I was going to say is, I sometimes my brain works very circuitously. So I was thinking a lot about, and I'm not going to dive into it because I don't want to bore you guys, but about FDR and his fireside chats and how that changed the presidency and how he redefined the office. I wasn't really thinking about Trump. I was thinking about the office. And then I was thinking about Truman, who, when he retired to his farm and he exited public. The office of the presidency has really changed since then. The U.S. has changed since then. World War II is the first war where the wartime propaganda didn't stop, and we've had wartime propaganda ever since World War II. Then we had Reagan, and there are questions about his age and if he was capable of holding the presidency, and he responded by being incredibly charismatic. He was an outsider, he was an actor. And then you had Obama. Obama, quote unquote, redefined the presidency in two ways. He went on late night television, which was unheard of. And he also brought in the executive order. So just to summarize real quickly, I'm going through it so I don't spend too much time. The office of the presidency has changed, and it's been changed by those men because they redefined the role, and the role has been something more of a celebrity. Whereas in the United States, the office of the presidency was not as important.
This is interesting.
It's never been after you're president, people care about it. It's just another office. It's just another role.
Can I add to that too? I feel like one of the major reasons why Trump's 2016 term and even 2020 is unlike today, I think everyone would agree, is that the real movement of history has shifted completely. Like the era that existed before 2020 is a bygone era. And I don't think Trump has fully come to terms with the fact that our unipolar moment is gone and that he can't fix it. So like he proposed the Ukraine deal where he was like, I'll get Putin and Zelensky to sit down. If what do you say? If Putin doesn't want to negotiate, then we'll give Ukraine all the weapons they want. If Zelensky doesn't negotiate, then we'll stop funding them. But it's like, if you see what's going on in Ukraine today, Russia is very clearly going to win. And it's like, well, what's stopping Putin from just laughing in his face? What's stopping Xi from just laughing in his face? He doesn't have the leverage that he used to have. And I don't think he's come to terms with that. And that kind of makes me worried that when they do laugh in his face, even Kim Jong-un can laugh in his face because they just signed that pact with Russia. Japan and South Korea have to reckon with North Korea now. So,
Mm.
you know, with that leverage being absent, I'm worried how he'll react to it.
I feel like one of the big questions is he talks so much, and he talked about this a lot in Rally about American prestige and America being respected around the world. But I think in some ways, part of how I understand that is that it's almost like he's making also a bargain to like his base, where he's like, in exchange for, in some ways, we could say still kind of like imperial retreat, we'll still position ourselves as like the most respected country in the world. And I don't know, I just don't think that there's like a practical way, even that Trump sees of like imposing American will on like all of these countries and like actually quote unquote being respected. And I feel like whether or not I don't know how much he believes it, but I do think that like he plays on the messaging of America being respected around the world and like America being like the number one country and all that stuff. But I feel like there's still some kind of pragmatism in terms of like his overall approach, which I do think is in part maybe incomplete, but is still some reflection of the changing world movement and like the movement of one history, like you were saying. But I feel like it's just not something that's like, it's not something that I feel like it's totally honest. I feel like in the way that he approaches it, it's more like he feels like he has a position, because that's also part of like what I think the base wants, which is the whole MAGA slogan is about like some idea of America, which has basically been crushed. Which has to do with, I think, in some ways, like almost a Cold War, stuff like that too.
Reagan.
And all
I think I wanted to just add one small thing to which I was thinking about when we were talking about BRICS nation, which is I had to look this up, but of the U.S. national debt, I think the U.S. owes around $1.1 trillion just to China. And the only nation that it owes more money to is Japan. And no other nation does the US owe as much money to. And which actually made me think about what you were saying, Karen, about, Trump does not have the leverage that he thinks that he has. But I also agree that there is a certain amount of value in how Trump would try to deal with other countries. The other thing is that I do think that the the G7 nations they're crumbling, they're collapsing. I think that, and it has come to a point where they have to resort to a certain amount of hypocrisy to keep their image in the world secure. Because I was reading this article about how the UK is now buying Russian oil from India.
Oh, shoot.
So they sanctioned Russia. Their people were hurting, and now they're buying oil, which India is buying from Russia at a much higher price. And well, the people of UK are having to pay an inflated price for oil. So it's all a bit of smoke and mirrors how they deal with foreign policy in these 7 countries. They don't want to do what the US is telling them to do, but I think that they are still doing it and then trying to subvert their because their nations are also at the brink of collapse. If you look at France and Germany and the UK, they have no choice but to resort to such techniques as buying Russian oil, but through somebody else.
We have a lot of comments. I think it's because of the title. Which is Trump. I think it's because of the title of the video, which is Trump Biden debate and the crisis of the Democratic Party. But you want to read the comments?
So John DeBar and Andrew Yang, former Democratic candidate, wrote this.
Speak up a little bit more.
I figured that his team has figured out the regimen to make his team pumped up and energetic. They seem to have it pretty well managed for this interview. And I responded too, are you kidding? Who would you have running the war that you started this process? Making Biden. And by what means would these people be selected? And by whom? And by what right would this group become entitled to decide who would have the world? And then, okay, there's like some comment discussion. Someone named UB Live said, I'm still voting for Biden after the debate because someday I want to be 80 years old, just like Biden. But voting for Trump will never see 80 years. Vote all. Walter Bambalai says, I wonder if the US is printing money in hopes of a war to somehow erase. What are your thoughts on BRICS? And does BRICS scare the power? A plutocracy will lead to a revolution. And then someone named Cody Wolfchild said, Biden met the militias and half our standing rock in his vice president. Trump is the perfect target for Native American and Indian counter-political. It solves Israel, it solves Ukraine, the immigration debate, equality, and equality. Biden would say what he really thinks out loud. Trump provides in the way of ammo for our common cause. Yeah, some debate about what represents. Laura Lomax says, didn't death actually really start with Trump's election? Walter says, loose cannon, Trump could be a useful idiot. Trump represents the white tribe who feel they're the white landowner citizens. Now the Democrats have spoken of as a race because of legal debate. Walter says, NATO is a military extension of the U.S. The Clinton administration deliberately interfered in elections to put in Flores and everything Flores. I think that Walter is moving from Europe. And then, yeah, just a lot of debate. Somebody says to the UB live person, you're voting for a murderer, you're a complicit enabler, and also a willful idiot.
What are they talking about?
I think there's just like debate on what Trump represents.
Yeah.
And whether like voting for Trump is like going to lead to the downfall of the country versus what voting for Biden. Yeah, I feel like and maybe I'll just read it from now on. But somebody says, yeah, BRICS is on the way, and the empire is behaving like a corner. And then, okay, this is maybe one of Cody Wolfchild. Of course, Trump uses the BRICS leaders. That's the USA profit tactic of Indian whisperers. He can make deals with savage chiefs and look them in the eye. This is like John Wilson stuff. And then, okay. Yeah, some discussion about Cornel West. Like, he doesn't love Dr. West. And some people are saying he's a bit outdated and vicious. Todd says Cornel West got the ball down, and he has too many compromises, quote unquote. And then, okay, Fiona has a comment that says, I feel Trump does not need specifics or policy because MAGA is an emotional reaction to what they believe are unmet social and economic needs. You don't need policy prescriptions, just work. And then, as Trump does CBT, which I think is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then the world inside the US is having a hard time believing in the age-old American dream. This is why I don't think MAGA is a white. There are pockets, but it's mostly an emotional movement. And those emotions can be irrational. Don says lots of workers of all strikes have had bad experiences with the legal system, which is designed to exploit all of us. The modes of exploitation vary and they change. If they continue to exist and develop, the courts are an important element. Oh, okay. Laura Lomax is clarifying this comment, which is that when she was saying that she thinks that the death of democracy did not start with Thursday debate, but rather with the Trump election.
But rather with what?
Like the Trump election way back in 2016.
See, this is, Laura's a friend of mine. I think this is, I think we got to get it straight. The death of American democracy. We have to say, what is American democracy anyway? And, I think often when people say American democracy, they're thinking about the status quo of elite-dominated political and economic institutions. And yeah, but I think, but I agree with Laura that there has to be a democratic struggle, but from whence and based upon what? So yeah,
Can I comment some of the comments? Like on that the democracy.
I think also clarify that that's a democracy, you could say ironically, where it's also the data costs.
yes, that's the way I would say it. I mean, when they use it, they're definite, when Biden and I, when we say democracy, are not at all talking about the same thing. At least I hope when I use it, I'm not talking about what he's talking about. But, sorry, it's not.
I mean, I guess with that clarification, I guess my response. I guess it's important to sit down and actually have these conversations to work out what is happening politically and to have this conversation about it. Because it seems like many commentators are not really putting forth like the mental exertion necessary to understand the moment because it is complicated. And I feel like many of the commentators are taking the easy way out and they're getting things wrong. Like they're saying like, oh, Trump is like blindly, gropingly, reaching the moment that he's reaching. But I think it's more deliberate. Like Trump's rally locations, like in North Philadelphia, or Wildwood, or Middle America, are deliberate. They're not giving him the credit of, okay, he's winning, right? Give him some credit for it's due. It's not just idiot. On the comment about printing money, only the US prints money. The Federal Reserve does not print money. The Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates. And that creates credit. That creates money out of thin air. So it's just a distinction. And that's why I wanted to say at the beginning, it's important to talk about this to actually understand. The dollar, a lot of people talk about Iraq as a war for oil. No, the war in Iraq is a war to preserve dollar dollars for the petrodollar, and it's it's a cop out. A lot of those comments are cop outs and lazy because I think to actually learn, I think it does require you to put yourself in a state of mental exertion. I think the same way you exercise a muscle, we need to exercise our mental muscles. And, yeah, so I sort of got the impression from a lot of the comments that they're quick and easy. They took the easy way out. Actually, something more complicated happens. Credit is not being given where it's due to Trump, and sort of the economics of the situation is not thoroughly understood. But I do agree with like the commentator that, I think that one way to deal with debt is to inflate the debt, and that's how
That's it. To inflate the debt or inflate the
Inflate the
currency
dollar.
to, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't-
But if you take that position, then this whole talk about economists saying, we don't need, to worry about inflation, it's going to go away. Well, if the plan is to inflate the dollar, then inflation is not going to go away. It's just going to be hidden.
I think it's very, yeah.
The thing with the debt though is almost all, if not a large majority of US sovereign debt is because of war.
Yes,
All of the wars, especially all the wars since 9/11, have been deficit. They've been wars that are funded through debt spending. And that's also connected to the dollar. The only reason why the US is being able to have such a large debt is because of the position of the US dollar. So that's also it's like where dollar hegemony, but debt, also debt, so war connected. Which is why like China is also disinvest. it's hard to communicate the point because the YouTube comment character limit is very short. And so I think that also encourages people to probably the story and snap the comment.
Did you finish the comment?
Yeah, Cody just added, I'm trying to be extra conspiratorial. I learn a lot each time. Love you all. May the good people of this place lead the world into peace and justice. And a fun fact about the Supreme Court, the Johnson versus McIntosh 1823 decision creates a precedent against Indian land titles. King Henry VII's 1496 charter for the pilgrims as white male landowners. Someone else has the dollar as a variable for IOU. Yeah, I think Cody is Native American.
Okay, maybe we can move on to the assessment of the science symposium and what it how it like leads to a new direction for the Year of James Baldwin.
Well, I have a lot of notes, and I'm going to try and keep it short, but please stop me at any time if I'm rambling. But we had this 2-day symposium in this very church, and we're very fortunate to have people come in from from out of town just to attend this symposium. And we also had Nanta and Raju here, who are our comrades in India. So it was 2 very beautiful days, full of rich discussion. And I think we put a lot of questions, if not fully answered, a lot of questions on the table that we'll have to work out going forward. And so because it was, a month back, more than focusing on the panels or the roundtables, specifically what I think I'll do is to talk about what we set out to achieve in that symposium, and what, in my opinion, I think we were able to achieve, and what do we still need to do going forward. So one of the, when we started thinking of doing the symposium, one of the things that we wanted to say was that this moment in particular, given the way things are unfolding, needs new theory, it needs new science that can explain the world, that can explain all these changes taking place in the world, but also in particular explain the political crisis in this country, where, in Doc's presentation in the morning, there's a clear majority, 70% of people who would like to see a fundamental, rehauling of the political and economic system. And more than ever, there is this huge divide between the college educated elite on one side and then the rest of America, and particularly the working poor. But then one of the things that we wanted to sort of put in the center was also the student movement and what that represented, what it said about this moment, because it created such an upheaval in the American university, and starting with some of the most elite colleges within the American university. And what we were trying to say is that you cannot just see this as protest or activism, but in fact, it is deeper than that. It's actually a political demand to change the basis on which these institutions operate, starting with the ideas and assumptions that they are founded on. And the other thing we wanted to say is, the students, what they're doing is they're challenging the authority of the American university, but in doing so, they're also challenging the authority of the American state, because the university and the state cannot be separated. The university is the state. It exists to serve the political, ideological, as well as the military agenda of the American state. And I feel like this question we looked at very closely, especially in the panel discussions we had at the symposium, where we looked at how the American university is instrumental in propping up this war economy, this endless war economy. But then also, and I think Raju said this, and it was very important to highlight, is that the basis of American power in the world, the 2 pillars, it doesn't even include the American military. It's the dollar, like we've been saying, and the American university. And that means something. So that, when you have this upheaval in the university where the most elite colleges see that the young people are resisting, challenging that authority, it's also an existential situation for the American state and its power over the world, especially over the ideological landscape. And then, important, there is the question of Zionism, how Zionism is not just a marginal presence in the American university. It's definitely a core value where, it's at the top level of leaderships, the money that pools into the university from Zionist donors. And you see this, and you feel it when you are in these elite institutions, that there's an unspoken gag order. You can never say anything about Palestine, and you cannot say anything about the Israeli state, if you want to keep your job or not be publicly shamed. And I think this is, again, a very strong, it strongly supports this assertion that the university cannot be separated from the state. Because the other thing that we were thinking about a lot when we were going into the symposium is how the American state does not just support the Israeli state, which is a Nazi state at this point, but they have Doc used the word symbiotic. They have a symbiotic relationship with the Israeli state. They depend on each other for their very existence. And this is one of the things that could no longer be kept under the wraps once the students took that moral stand, because the same university that talks such big talk about freedom of speech, democratic discourse, DEI, all of that, how dangerous misinformation is. The whole world saw that same university lie, make up stories, censor students, and then come down on the students with police and riot gear. So, the hypocrisy and the moral cowardice of the American university has been exposed forever. I don't think at this point there is a way to go back from that. But then the big question that remains open is, how do you now break the authority that the university still has on how a lot of people think about the world? What kind of knowledge can even be produced in an institution that is so undemocratic, that has such a narrow goal? Because the goal really is to paint a picture of the world that the ruling elite wants you to see. So with so narrow a goals, with such undemocratic principles, what kind of knowledge can even be produced? And this is another aspect of what we looked at, especially through the second panel discussion on the second day, which is to look closely at theories like postmodernism and identity politics and see what it is saying, about knowledge, about the human capacity to know, and then concluding that what they're really trying to say is that, the world is so complicated, it's so, it's just so difficult. It's not possible for any one person to understand it in its entirety. The best you can do is partial truths. And even these partial truths, the only way you reach them is through your identity. But I think one of the achievements of the symposium was to actually be able to put together postmodernism, identity politics, even a figure like Judith Butler and her particular brand of gender theory, to put it together with theoretical physics, in particular, string theory and AI. Now, putting all of these things together would be contested because there's supposed to be this dividing line between the natural sciences and then the social sciences. But if you actually allow yourself to transgress that line and put all of it together, the picture becomes clearer, and you can see that there is indeed something unifying about all of these theories. And that unifying link is basically to obscure the truth, hide it under so many layers of abstraction, be it math or be it this unintelligible jargon of the postmodern rhetoric. Whatever it is, you obscure it so much that you reach a point where it becomes you can justify saying that maybe there is no truth. Maybe there is no truth for the human being to struggle towards. Maybe this is as far as human knowledge is able to go, and from this point on, all knowledge will probably be produced by machines, giving AI that but then what we were trying to establish is that this attack on the human being is also an attack on struggle. This is an anti-struggle, anti-human position which cannot take human knowledge forward. And I feel like there's something deeply ironic and pathological about this, suicidal even, because if you think about it, if the ruling elite is telling world humanity at large that this is as far as you're allowed to go, what they're really saying is this is as far as the white man can go. But that also means that this is as far as humanity as a whole is even allowed to go, because you can't outdo the white man. But then this condemnation that there is no future, there is no path forward, is also a condemnation of white people, because it limits their human possibilities also. I mean, I think, and today morning's discussion was also making me think like this, which is that it would take a great deal of humility and a great deal of sacrifice for these people to actually admit that they have exhausted themselves intellectually, in terms of theory, they've exhausted themselves and they don't know how to extricate themselves from that situation. But learn from the world, learn from China. How is it able to do what it is doing for its society? Learn from its own history. Go back to the Black freedom tradition. Look at the revolutionary chronology and understand what the revolutionary process in this country has to look going forward if it has to keep pace with the world as it is moving forward. But instead, what we see is this psychosis where they'd rather choose to go to war with China and Russia at the same time, even provoke nuclear war without having any evidence that you could ever win a hand like that. But then they're willing to sacrifice all of humanity, but also themselves in the process of finding out what that would look like. And I feel like this, you cannot just explain this. And I think Jeremiah had pointed this out at some point and it really stuck with me. You cannot explain this with the language of just imperialism or, just like economic theories. There is also the psychological element, which really establishes a strong case for why we need Baldwin right now, because he studied this and he's able to explain this in a modern language that fits this moment. I have a couple more broad points to talk about. Okay, cool. I'll just try to. Well, one of the things that since the symposium, I think it came out very strongly in the symposium, but then going forward in free school, it's made me think about this question a lot, is again the question of civilization and what is the basis of American civilization? Is it white or is it something else? And I said this in free school last time that, when you look at the situation in Gaza, again, the language of just this is imperialism is not enough. What actually explains something about what is happening is that it is in defense of white civilization. The defense of Israel for the American state is a defense of white civilization. And the massacre of Palestinians is in defense of white civilization. But then, this question becomes important going forward, because what we're also trying to make sense of is American civilization actually white? Because if you go back to the time of the first American Revolution, 1776, when it breaks with Europe, it does not break with white civilization, But then the question of civilization could not be settled till the question of slavery was settled. As long as you had slavery on these shores, you couldn't, settle that question of what American civilization is going to be. And I'm going to draw on, the idea of the social system a little bit. And this is just, maybe a leap, but this is how I'm thinking about it, is also this myth that American civilization could be based on European civilization or white civilization also allows for the solidification of that white supremacist social system. Whereas in opposition to it, you have the Black freedom social system, which is basically trying to work out a new identity, a new basis for both civilization, but also modernity going forward in this country that won't be, circumscribed by white standards. And this is a question that came up in the first roundtable of the symposium, where we talked about the revolutionary chronology, the importance of getting the revolutionary chronology in this country right. and particularly the importance of W.E.B. Du Bois as a theorist of revolutionary change, where when he studies where he studies the Civil War and Reconstruction, he's able to see that this is a revolutionary struggle that takes the, democratic struggle forward. And the freedom of the Black worker creates that possibility of a civilization in potentiality. And from then on, if you follow that chronology, you go to the third American Revolution. What is the civil rights movement? What is King really asking? It's not really revolution in the sense of, oh, the capitalist class needs to be destroyed and we need socialism. What he calls for is a revolution of values. And he says that American society has to transform its value system from something that allows these triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism to, exist, to something that's oriented towards peace, that's oriented towards human dignity, human freedom. And so he's basically talking about a civilization, America moving towards being a civilization of peace. And then you look at all of the art and music, the cultural revolution that was inspired by the Black freedom movement. And, Emily's presentation on the Harlem Renaissance art really brings that out, is when you look at that, there is no way to deny that the question of civilization, the question of identity was very important, where the question of what is colored modernity going to look like, what is this modern man going to look like, was so important. And what all of that makes me feel is, with all of this going on, with this rich theory coming out, the art, the music coming out of Black freedom movement, how could this country remain white? How could its civilization be rooted in whiteness? And this is something that Baldwin clarifies over and over in his essays, his novels, when he speaks. You can never convince me that anybody in this country is actually white. That's what he's saying. And the other thing he says, which is important, is that as long as this nation continues to root itself in white civilization, as long as it continues to think of itself as a white nation, whenever out in the world, whenever it sees a dark face, it will see and treat that person just like it has seen and treated the Black man. And I mean, there is really no way to unsee this when you see what is going on in Gaza right now. So again, I bring up that question of civilization is one, because I think we were also making the assertion that it's the Black freedom tradition that actually has a basis to offer for what is to become, if it is allowed to become, American civilization. And the last broad point I want to talk about is something that I also brought up last free school, of Baldwin and W.B. Du Bois, because
What was the word you used?
complementary. Yeah, not as like more than a synthesis. The fact that they serve a certain complementary purpose for this time, where I want to begin with what I think is similar and very important, is that I think both of them are theorists of crisis, and both of them take on the project of telling or, highlighting the narrative of the Black struggle and the Black life world, which is a project that had to be taken on because the white world wouldn't do it. The white world would much rather see that, never allow it to see the light of day. So they had to take on this project, to explain the Black man, to explain the life world that the Black social system produces and what is the capacity that comes out of it. But then Du Bois, he also studies the world. He studies Russia, he studies China, he studies Africa, and he contextualizes the Black struggle in the broad sphere of the world revolutionary movement. And the theory that comes out of it, with the Black worker as at its center, and this is something we talked about in the symposium also, has the potential to be a universal theory or a general theory of revolutionary change in the world, in a world that is dominated by a white supremacist world system, where the Black man, this condition of the Black man, is a mirror almost for the condition of dark humanity everywhere. But then you come to Baldwin, and he does some of this too. Especially important is how he relates America with Europe. And, he's studying empire. So he does some of that. But then the thing that he does, which is unique and so important, is he explains the white man, and explains the white man not just like, in an academic way, but basically how does he think, what does he fear? What are the things he lies to himself about? What are his desires? And the other thing that's important is he explains the terms you would be offered once you get a seat at the welcome table, so to speak. So for somebody like me coming in from India, he explains something about this world that would be hard for me to understand otherwise, because you come here and you're like, why is it that I don't fit in with this system that I'm being corralled into? And what he says is, you were never meant to fit in, and it's in fact what you're confronted with is the moral choice to choose to reject these standards and to embrace your own civilization and move towards something higher, join hands with world humanity. And I think this is also going back to the question of the students. This is also what they're trying to do, because they have been able to give up a certain element of safety in quoting these arrests, in accepting the consequences of what their protests might lead to. And I think the central demand then becomes for a new kind of human being in this moment. And that is why I feel like this idea that came out of the symposium, that this is a moment to bring Baldwin and Du Bois together for a new theory or a new region of thought that explains this world, this moment, I think was very powerful and something that we should keep working on. Because at the world stage, I mean, we talked so much about the debate, and I mentioned how the world is watching this. On the world stage, the American hegemony or power is definitely very unstable and not, it's not clear that it will survive the blow. But then you also have the crisis of interior lives of white people. And so all this synthesis of these complementary regions of thought leading to a new theory is definitely something that came out of the symposium that's worthwhile for us to develop more. But maybe I'll stop there. I'm sure I have more to add later on, but talk maybe you want to say.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't think you mentioned it, but in our planning, I thought that it all came together after you and Sambarto drafted and wrote the call to the conference, which I think is still a great document. And I think it pinpointed the problem or the problematic, that the universities cannot act like they stand, above the world with clean hands, when in fact, as you all pointed out, that the universities are up to their in and better in the genocidal state that it is. And no university, except for what the students force them to do, none of them acknowledge that they are part of this genocide. And so how can you claim to produce objective knowledge or knowledge to serve humanity when you are a central player in support of a Nazi regime and of a genocide? I think this is still a message that we have to get out better because it clarifies so much. But I think this thing, and we're going to, I think we have to work on this. And you and Sambarto's article on science is another very important pillar in our understanding how epistemology is linked to politics and morality, that there is no abstract epistemology, and how you all call for new epistemology coming out of the Third American Revolution, which is still not acknowledged as a revolution, but how the promise of a future civilization, of a different modernity, is so anchored to this Third American Revolution and its great thinkers, and how, and I think I just admire the way you guys did it, how there is no revolutionary struggle without revolutionizing the epistemological and moral foundations of knowledge, and especially in this world. I know I'm always telling stories. If you don't mind, I want to tell another one. And I think it relates very directly to this. I met in a Zoom conversation with 4 men representing a left political party who wanted me to teach a course on Henry Winston, but really who wanted to recruit me into their party. And their claim or their project is to reclaim all of the past, of the early Communist Party, the Communist Party of the 30s, of the 40s, and to revive everything. Well, and that's, some would say the golden era of the Communist Party. I wouldn't put it that way. When there were 100,000 members and, and such, and, there were things we agreed upon. We agreed that Biden should be defeated, on and on. So I said, yeah, we can work together. The question of peace, we can work together. But I said, I don't quite agree with your desire to reclaim something from a different era, because most movements to reclaim something obscure the present and the future. And I said, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, there's been a change. There was a change even before that. And I said, you're not going to bring back what was, and you're not going to bring back the world communist movement as it was. But what the challenge for us at the level of ideology and morality and revolutionary politics is how we know the world, how the revolutionary forces can challenge the worldview of the ruling elites of the West. And I think the way you all put it is right on point. And I agree with Samir here that this idea that we don't have to think because all great thoughts have already taken place, that European modernity is modernity, that European civilization is the civilization that all people must eventually adhere to in the name of modernity. There is no Chinese modernity that is not modeled upon European modernity. There's no Indian modernity. There's no African modernity. Everything is derivative of the West. Hence, there is the end of history. Even before Fukuyama announced it, the assumption was history ends with Europe and European modernity. But then to think through it, you have to think of it in its essence, which means the epistemological question. What is knowledge? How do you assess knowledge? Where does knowledge come from? What is the purpose of knowledge? And I think at this time, of an when I say an existential crisis, we're talking about civilization, the existence of a civilization. How will it go forward? Can the people from whom it originated take it any further than they have? So I think the big political task is the one that we're talking about. And I think that as part of this is the, I don't want to use the word fusion. What's the word you used again? Complementarity. Yeah, the complementarity of Baldwin and Du Bois. What can come out of that? What will it trigger in creativity? Apropos Emily's talk about the Harlem Renaissance, Kathy's writing on pop art, postmodern pop art, and Biden, now, but Basquiat versus Jacob Lawrence versus
Warhol.
the collage artist Romer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or, for example, let us take jazz versus hip hop, postmodern versus a different path of colored modernity. I think is a way to think about it. You know, where all of these questions, because we can't just live in a world and accept whatever comes down the pipe. Oh, this Basquiat. Okay, you know, I have a certain sympathy or empathy for Basquiat. Died so young, you know, created a lot of stuff, a lot of art. And plus, I saw the movie, which was very, you know. So how could I say, I'm a little bit emotional kind of guy. So I like Basquiat. But where was this going? Where was this going? It's just like in photography, Gordon Parks, you know, me and Michelle, you know, some of this, you know, so much of modern contemporary photography when doing Black people, all we're doing is hanging out. Oh, we're hanging out in the playground. Oh, no, we're hanging out on the, we just hang out all the time. And she was showing me, what you think of that? I don't like that. What you know, I don't. Then she opened the book. Here's Gordon Park. This is what I'm talking about. Remember that? Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I think this is deep because like Raju and Kathy and maybe some other people were looking at this book about like African American artists, and it basically, I mean, you can compare Lawrence, who depicted like not just the Black freedom struggle, but the American revolutionary process, and then the world revolutionary process after a certain point. Always the people in struggle to like this artist Motley, who is like his foil in that time, who only ever portrayed Black people. Well, it was actually really bad because he said, "Oh, I always look among white people, but I love these Black people's Negroid features, and I like the way they smile when they play at the pool hall and when they dance to jazz, and you see it in the paintings, but I just know what you're saying, which I think this thing about like Black folk in struggle in particular is extremely important. Yeah.
You know,
But
this
yeah.
idea of something more than themselves. They represent, and that's what Gordon Parks, that's what Jacob Lawrence, that's what Romare, all of them, in their portrayals of Black people, that this Black person that I'm portraying is iconic. He or she represents more than what you see. This representation is of more than just what you're looking at. It's the difference between what we call the phenomenal form and the the material essence, something deeper than just what you see, which gets to your essay, you and Sambarto's essay of quantum mechanics, the world ultimately, because there's the world outside of me can't be explained, so the world must be me, and the artists, have made this epistemic break, this challenge by saying, that's why you gotta love Gordon Parks. What you see is more than just what you're looking at. It's what's his name told James Baldwin. Buford Delaney. Baldwin said, Buford taught me how to look. How to look. What do you see? Well, I see this. No, look again. Look again. Keep, you're always, and it's just so pregnant. What you're saying, this moment, this Black freedom movement, and even going back to the Harlem Renaissance, was pregnant with epistemological ruptures, and that frees the scientist, that frees the intellectual, that frees the poet, that frees the artist to then be revolutionary. Because you can't be it on your own. You need the ideological, epistemological, moral conditions that free you up to be revolutionary.
Right.
That's all.
Can I? What you're saying also, I think this also means that there has to be a new theory even about things like racism, where what we are saying is that the attack on, the Black freedom tradition, on King, all these figures, it was not just something, I don't know how to say it, but it's not racism in the way racism is talked about. It's actually, and it had to be done to stop what you're saying, these epistemological ruptures or the epistemic break from the West. And so I think in our moment, especially with the world changing in the ways that it's doing with Asia, this resurgence of Asia, the things in West Asia, all the developments, I think we need to also have new theory of what racism means, or what it has meant historically, but especially what it means in this time. Because, you can't go Kendi's way, like, Ibram Kendi, all these people, critical race theory, they sort of, they want to make it static, like something that's formulaic, that you can just pass down and make, policies out of or whatever, but it does not.
Can I say something just right on that point?
Yeah.
You're very right. There is a parallel to what ultimately became the Copenhagen consensus, that the world outside of me is irrelevant or doesn't exist.
Right.
The same thing with critical race theory, what they call critical race theory or modern race theory. I'm talking about since the 90s, let us say. What are they talking about? What I experience, I want to change not the world, but change policy.
Yeah.
Because the world is not a comfortable place for me, but it's always the me that is prioritized. So it is the subject without an objective world, without a world beyond the subject. I don't know that I make all the sense. So you can take Judith Butler, you can take Ibram Kendi, you can take the Copenhagen consensus, and you can see a common epistemological foundation, or as you all point out, a common view of science and knowledge tied up with positivism.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Wait, can you repeat the thing about the subject? It's a subject without an objective world.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, that's what you said.
Yeah, that's.
Well.
This is huge.
Yeah.
And it is not new. But it was always the question. Let me put it this way. If if the quest to know takes me beyond my experience, what I can see, what I can feel, ultimately what I can know, if I go beyond that, then where will it take me? If the world is more than me, then it's not a matter of just changing me or people like me for me, but it is to change a world that is more than me. You know, there is a reason, and I learned this from Purba. I knew it from my own experience with intellectuals, but when she talks about the life world of the scientific laboratory, where everything is not uh, the self. Everything, the world revolves around me. What I like, what I don't like, what I see, what my research is, what I'm going to do, what my it's always narcissism. It never takes the leap towards the moral and revolutionary imperative. What separates Baldwin? Why is Baldwin so uncomfortable? For all the people he should be comfortable for. You would think, well, everybody should like, but right? It's not. It doesn't seem like no big parades or whatever extolling Baldwin. Why not? You know, it's because Baldwin is an uncomfortable thinker because he says the world is more than me. And the world that must be changed is not just me, but the world. And so, even as he probes the unconscious, the psychoanalytic dimension of the self, and as you point out, Purba, think about it. Baldwinian approach to race and white supremacy is more systemic psychological than just psychological. I use systemic psychological where others would use social psychological. You see what I'm saying? Because then I think when you use systemic psychological, you always bring into the conversation, into the assumptions, the ideological conditions of the system. You see what I'm saying? Just to say social, it's kind of not so clear what you're talking about all the time. Are you running from something? Are you obscuring something? I think if you say the systemic psychological, I think it is a little more or a lot more pointed, a lot more to the point. The the narcissism which elevates the subject at the expense and the denial of the objective world. Now, you say the objective world could be any level of things. It's not just a mechanical set of objects, out there in the Newtonian sense. But we can come back to that. What is the objective world?
Yeah.
How is it constituted? Is it just objects of nature? Or is the social system objective and subjective? Does that make sense? I mean, human social relations are different than the relationship of the human to the natural. In human social relationships, there are intimate connections, their feedback loops, positive and negative. There's a constant process of evolution, of development, but it is more than what I, as a thinker, researcher, whatever, experiences. Yeah, other human beings, but yet as a totality, as a group, as a system, they constitute an objective world. To know the social world is to know more than me or to know more than the individuals as individuals. In other words, it is more than the sum of its parts. I'm taking us off point.
No, I think, well, I mean, just short comment. I think this relates to the discussion we've been having about the social system.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Because, you know,
Which is not a subjective thing, although the subjects of research are deeply embedded in a system. And you just can't count all the individuals up and say, oh, I got the system. No, you don't. The system is bigger than the sum of its parts because it exists in an interactive, evolutionary condition. I can say more. I'm not using all the best language. We can expand it. Does that make sense? We're a social system, even a mode of production. And this is where Marx was very right about this. It is human, it is constituted by human beings, but it is more than the sum of the human beings that make it up. Social relationships are more than the sum of the human beings that constitute those social relationships. It is just the same as the different, if it's just the sum of its parts, that would give you a quantitative understanding of it. But when you see it as more than the sum of its parts, you're looking at a qualitative relationship. Well, everything is, all systems, all relations are both quantitative and qualitative. But I'm not explaining it as well as I want to. But this is where Baldwin is so, and I agree with you, Emily, about Baldwin representing something new epistemologically. And there is something in Baldwin that you don't find in Du Bois. I agree with you about that. After thinking about it for many days, I find that you're very accurate about that.
Yeah. Well, I think the science, actually, I felt like you were giving, like, in some ways, a theoretical framework for what why I feel the way I do about Baldwin. Because actually, even though the science conference was about, even though the science symposium was really about the crisis of the American university and the crisis of knowledge, I actually felt like it really changed like my mindset and also I don't know, in some ways it gave me the language and like reinvigorated a certain part of my brain to see Baldwin the right way. And I think it's also because of what we talked about. Like, I also really paid attention to, like, I think the importance of the science symposium for the Year of Baldwin is this thing of, like, how do I phrase it? Like, I think the Du Bois Baldwin complementarity and the way we talked about, like, I just think there's something about this thing of that modernity, but also you could even say the future, like the future, where the source of the future will come from was important. And it just also really confirmed to me something like I had already felt, which is I really think it's Baldwin specifically based upon the foundation of Du Bois as well. I really feel like Baldwin is the entry point for the American people today. I don't think it's anyone else but Baldwin, actually. And the reason why is because, and the reason why I feel that way is because I just do think that because of the civil rights movement or the Black freedom struggle, I said this last week, but like, and I hope I can explain it better, is I just think what Du Bois called the color line did not become, like, because of the Black freedom struggle, the color line is not the color line anymore. Does it make sense? Like, I feel like it's not, but like the white social system and black social system is not really, there's a intertwining, there's something that in some ways can change. Like there's something, what the black freedom struggle showed and made in reality is that Baldwin calls it that whiteness, it's not a color line, but in fact that whiteness is also, it's like a moral and political choice.
Yes.
And I just feel like for some reason that's a very significant thing. I guess that's what Prabha, you're saying, we need a new language for race. Like I don't think Baldwin would even he would not say race. Like I think Baldwin would be like, I don't believe in race. He'd be like, there is no white people. Like whiteness, it's a delusion. Like the way that Baldwin basically says that the whole way that Americans today see things is wrong. And the key to changing the world is if people first see things differently. I feel like that's Baldwin. And it's in some ways there's something important about like Baldwin even connecting that the way you even see yourself, the way you even perceive yourself, that you look in the mirror, like an individual looking in the mirror, what you think you see is not even real. Like it's not true necessarily. But you have to be able to first know that how you see yourself is impacted by something, like whether it's called society or like a social structure. I feel like there's something really important about that. And I also link it to the Buford, the way, like I've been really impacted recently by Baldwin's essays on art, because I really don't think Baldwin was that obsessed with seeing himself as an artist. What he was obsessed with was like being someone who belonged to the future, like someone who never becoming like a new human being, or like becoming someone who's not ever confined or loyal to what is, but rather always in pursuit of what ought to be. And I don't know, there's something about this, and I feel the reason why I think this came from the science conference is I also feel really reinvigorated about our reading group and at the Parkway Central Library, because actually I think what people are moved by is they want to question what they think they see. Like I think people want to question what they always took for granted, which is how they see things. Like even something like not just the genocide in Gaza, but even like themselves or their romantic relationships or their sense of self or their like profession or their career. And I think it is related. It's not something shallow or narcissistic or personal to like question, but instead what you're questioning is the way human beings are formed. Like the way human beings in this country are formed by a social system that also is like bound to and based upon like moral and political and ideological like confines and standards. And that's also why I think increasingly the word complexity is important. Like I think, Doc, you brought this up in the last roundtable, but you called it like the reason why Baldwin is important is because Baldwin describes the modern man who like describes a modern human being who like does live in a complex, okay, maybe this is actually my words, but I was responding to whatever you said as I think there's a key to understanding that America is the most complex society in the whole world. And it's because of what we understand as race. It's a highly racialized society. And it's not just a capitalist society, but it's a racialized society that like is deliberately meant to like force the complex human beings who are like created by the complex society to confine themselves into binary or like very reduced simplistic terms. And when you do that is when you create a delusion. Like, I don't know, I just think there's a key to that. I know I didn't really describe anything well in these past, but I just do think, I just know that it changes actually our reading groups actually. And I think our last reading group at the Parkway Central Library was like a really was an example of that people are ready to talk in new ways. Like people are not just ready to see in new ways, but people are ready to talk in new ways. And the new language is in Baldwin in particular. So yeah, and that's why I think the science conference was a big deal to me, because I actually think I think in some ways what we're putting into practice is even not like both thinking and speaking in a new language, new definitions, and that requires us to like Doc said, revolutionize. You have to revolutionize the foundations of your epistemology to be able to engage in revolutionary struggle.
Well, I think one of my big questions with Baldwin and with Baldwin's philosophy is, I think in some ways Baldwin is the figure who it's easiest to portray as like just a quote unquote just a writer. And I think that's how a lot of people relate to him. And I think when we make the claim that Baldwin is a philosopher and a revolutionary, I think that throws a lot of people off. But I think one of my questions is there, especially in the realm of doing like new revolutionary science, is there a task what you would say is like quote unquote systematizing Baldwin's thought, or does Baldwin himself resist systematization, if you know what I mean? Because I think also in a lot of ways, King and Du Bois are the easiest to kind of be like, okay, like these are kind of the major like systems, like pillars, categories of like Du Boisian thought, of Kingian thought. But in a lot of ways, the way that Baldwin does philosophy, it can resist that kind of easy categorization in a lot of ways because of the way that he operates as a thinker, the way that he operates as a philosopher. And I wonder if this is like part of an open question because it also gets into what we're trying to do with the next issue of avant-garde, which is to, in a lot of ways, explore like those those regions of Baldwin's thought that no one has ever really explored before. But part of it is like, I think what is difficult about the challenge that we're taking is like, yeah, we're pushing for like new and better revolutionary theory in science, but like I feel like so much of how people perceive even like revolutionary theory in science is like kind of almost like neat categories and neat systems of thought, which are very like almost like digestible. But I feel like we're not pushing something which is so neat. But then I feel like that also poses the question of what is science? Like what kind of science are we involved in? And is there like a Baldwinian mode of doing science, which has not really been defined yet, but is not just something which is like, oh, we're just trying to systematize Baldwin's thought into being like, okay, like here's Baldwin's concept of whiteness, like here's Baldwin's like X, Y, Z, which like we do in some ways, but I feel like it's not that easy. And I feel like also the way that Freestyle operates is like it's not just about like let's give a lecture on like here are like the 5 main things that you can like kind of get involved with. I don't know, but I've been thinking about that because I think it's like a larger question of like what is the project that we're involved in, and it's like can we also draw from Baldwin a new mode of thinking, which is not because I feel like that's also Baldwin's thinking. Like you can't categorize me. Every time people try to categorize me, they're wrong. And I feel like he makes that point many times. But yeah, I think it's I guess it's also a question of or maybe a related question of like I feel like we're trying to work out this question of like the color line and race, like what is the current social systematic composition of American society. But I think a large part of it too is like we are proceeding from the notion that the Third American Revolution left an indelible and irreversible impact on the consciousness and also the social fabric of American society. And part of what we're trying to work out is like what was the nature of that break that happened and how did it actually impact the American people, which I feel like we're still like working out, like we're still like doing that kind of investigate.
Well, because here's a concrete example, I guess, of what you're saying, which is built on what I was trying to say, which is I think Baldwin explains my life, and I don't think Du Bois does. Like, it's kind of an interesting question, right? Like, Du Bois means Du
Can I ask
Bois.
you a question? What part of your life? The interior or both exterior and external? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's a good question.
You don't have to answer it.
No, it's a good question because I think Du Bois explains part of my life.
Okay.
The part that in some ways I felt like came later.
Mhm.
Like Baldwin, okay, because I thought about this a lot because Du Bois in some ways, I think in some ways Du Bois, I was always attracted to Du Bois. But I actually think Baldwin was, I just think there's this thing of whiteness being a moral choice. It's actually played a huge role in my life.
No, I hear you.
And like think about Du Bois in some ways, like Du Bois, if he were
This is
to
interesting.
see me, Du Bois would see me as a Chinese woman in America. But I'm not as simple as that. Right? I am shaped by my ancestor civilization to an extent that my parents consciously or unconsciously raised me with certain values, wherever that may be, right? But that's also complex in of itself because my parents, they're not just Chinese, they're coming from a certain time period, right? But I'm an American in the sense that I'm heavily, actually perhaps more than what my parents, the spiritual and political resources my parents didn't even know they were giving me by like what they did in my home, the way I modeled myself after them, but then the way I also choose not to model myself after them. My battle was never really with my parents. My battle was not even with my civilization. My battle was with an American society I didn't know I'd have to battle. And I think Baldwin explains that. Like, I think in some ways, like that big rupture point in my life in college. Well, I don't know if other people feel the same way, but for some reason, there's something like, I think I'm also a product in some ways, like my life choices are also a product of because of King, what King was able to do.
Yes.
Like I'm only possible because of King in some ways, or like the choice I'm making to be a revolutionary is only possible because of King, and it's only explained by in some ways Baldwin's theory. Because yeah, I feel like Du Bois would say I'm a dark princess, right? But I'm not the dark princess.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
See, I think what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong, is that Baldwin lays the foundation for you to have an identity that is American in the revolutionary sense. I think he does
Yes.
that. I think,
Right.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Can I say something too? Well, I think, I agree with that, like an indispensable entry point, and maybe like the revolutionary theoretical entry point for people, like the American people at this point. And I think I wanted to add that I feel like it's through Baldwin that you can essentially relocate like your revolutionary American inheritance, because like I've thought about this a lot over the years in preschool because we've talked about this period of history quite a bit, like the last 3-4 decades, which have been, like the counter-revolutionary dip after the assassination of King and like the systemic destruction of the gains of the Black freedom movement. And I see myself very much as a product of that generation where namelessly, like I had to grope for something that had, like I felt like something was already missing from my life by default. And I felt like it was a link in my interior life between myself and the society which produced me and in which I would develop and self-actualize. And this is where I think, like you said, like Baldwin's formulation of whiteness as a moral choice becomes very valuable because it's only by that moral choice that you can yoke yourself back into like the larger fabric of a society. For example, I would say it seems to me that the Chinese people do not struggle with this as much. There's more of an organic
Chinese people in China.
Yes, like there's a more organic tethering between like, oh, I'm an Asian in society, I can further the project of my civilization. But the piece that I think about with King as well is, I don't know if before the civil rights movement there was such a systemic way for like all Americans en masse to be able to make the moral choice in a way that would impact not just themselves as individuals, but like institutions, right? The state, the way that like all of these different frontiers of society and the way they interlocked. That could usher in like the transformation of America as a whole. And then the other thing I was thinking about that was connected to what Jeremiah had said was I was remembering how King described how Gandhi was the first to lift the love ethic of Jesus Christ into the realm of like organized, disciplined, mass social action. And then, so I feel like, and then King, of course, like took that to another stage with the way that they deployed the Gandhian method for a freedom movement in America. And I feel like I don't think this is exactly the same question, but this is the question I'm asking is what the deployment of like Baldwinian thought as revolutionary theory, what that would look like in a systemic, in movement form in this time is something that like I think is, I mean, it's just really on my mind. Because it's dealing with a lot of different factors that we're talking about here. I mean, what would it mean for Americans to finally link the interior, the private, with the public, the exterior? And I think that's what makes Baldwin so severe, so unassailable, is that, yeah, like the sword cuts both ways. Like now you can see yourself, and what will you do with that reality? Yeah. But you know, the last thing I wanted to say is I think it's also nice hearing about like the Central Library Reading Group because like Nuri Purba and my reading group has not been meeting this summer since the students are away. I feel like I've lost a little bit of perspective on just how much of an edge these ideas have in a disciplined, like, I mean, I think the reading groups are real engines, you know, in a disciplined environment where these ideas are being struggled through.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, you know, through my journey in the left, I guess, over the years, I've struggled greatly to come to terms with my Jewishness, for example. I became very disillusioned with, you know, the Jewish faith and people over time just because I was very disappointed in how Zionism was so mainstream. You know, it even caused a rift in my own family when I tried to talk about it, you know, but I'm very grateful that this free school, I guess, put me on to James Baldwin because I feel like I'm finally starting to come close to reconciling this. Something Raya and I talk about a lot. And I just look forward to discovering that.
Well, the reason why I also think Baldwin, like, I think Baldwin is the entry point for white people in America, and as well as like Asians and like whatever, all the diverse peoples. I can't list them all, but it's like, because even at the central branch of the Free Library before our reading group, there was an older Black man who came, and he was like a little like we were talking, and he was like, "So what do you know about James Baldwin?" Because his perspective, he's like, Baldwin is a Black writer. He was like, he's a Black writer for Black people. And I was like, you know, I've read some stuff, but I think he's really helped me explain my life. And I could tell he was skeptical. And he actually told me, he was like, it's really odd seeing how diverse of a room we have, because you had Asians, white people, and Black people. And it's funny because I say mixed race people, but then Katrin corrected me. She was like, mixed race is a very modern concept, because back in the day, there's no such thing as mixed race. There's just Black. But yeah, there was like mixed race people too. And which also means like, you know, like, educated people who don't consider themselves Black would say mixed race, but whatever. And this older Black man was just like, he was like, it's really weird that such a diverse group is reading Baldwin. And I was like, but to me, I was like, I don't think that's weird. I think that's what it was meant to be. And then that kind of also made me think a lot about Baldwin as an entry point for today, because I also think it's really the connection between Baldwin as also a theorist who emerged because of and out of the Black freedom struggle, which I think you were like, when you say he's a witness, and like, yes, he's a witness of the Black freedom struggle, but I just think there's something important about that link, because I've been really obsessed with the way Baldwin calls the revolutionary process essentially, which he says is an individual project that is connected towards joining an individual to your own history and society. He calls it the creative process. He's not talking about the artist. He's talking about the creative process of a human being in America to pick up the revolutionary struggle and be part of forging that new language, which is also a new like way of understanding yourself and your history, and thus like preparing you to like when you can reconcile something in the interior, it allows you to like be part of the reconciliation of something external, like the political project. And but in the way that connects to the way it connects to King saying like we have a creative will. Like the task is for us to pick up a creative will that all of us have, is the creative will to be, or the creative will to become. And it's the way that Robeson says that the West, or that you said, like the West has exhausted itself. It doesn't have the creative will. It doesn't have the spiritual energy to turn the key. Like it created the key, but can't turn the key in the lock. And yeah, so and also like, okay, because the reason why I'm not trying, this is not me. I hope no one thinks that I like am hating on Du Bois, because the opposite, like Du Bois is my life. But like for example, there's that really famous Chinese woman who went to the South. Like, oh, first of all, how do you explain? Like Baldwin is explaining in his writings, he's not explicitly saying it, but he's explaining all those like young people, not just young Black people, young white people, literally leaving college, Ivy League universities, Columbia, Cornell, to go south. And some of them were south and become a human being, become an American. And where you're choosing the major inheritance of being a human being, being an American, over the minor inheritance of being white. And you know, it's so interesting. And like, but anyways, there's this Chinese woman who this famous civil rights photographer showed was part of the Citizen Education Project.
Oh, yes.
Her name is Mu-Sing Lee. Nothing is written about her. No books, no research. Like someone would actually have to do a PhD dissertation on it in order for her whole life to be uncovered. But in those photos, we were looking at them and we didn't say, oh, wow, she looks like a Chinese woman in the South making a great sacrifice, like da-da-da-da. We said, wow, she looks Black. You know what I mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to say like, you know, Du Bois would be like, it's, you know, Du Bois, I think, has a certain framework, but Baldwin is like, it's people becoming, not just rejecting a moral choice to be white, but becoming, how do you want to say, becoming Black, becoming a new American, what's the language? I don't know. We don't have the language yet, but becoming like, you know, choosing the Black social system. Like, I don't know. I think this is the language that emerges from Baldwin. And I think it's Baldwin completing the foundation of Du Bois. Like,
I think
and
I hear what you're saying very, very clearly, more clearly now. You know, the concept of the color line, which is not an actual line, it's a metaphor for the separation of the races, you know. And you're saying Baldwin saw, even transpiring during the time of the Black freedom struggle, a new human being emerging that transcended, that's Baldwin literally says it, that transcends the identities established by the color line.
right.
I think there's something to think about there. Mhm. And I think, you know, even methodologically, you got two different things. You know, Du Bois is this great inventor of metaphors, you know, a wage for whiteness, a color line, double consciousness, all of these things. But I think you're right about Baldwin. He does explore the interior life and the potential of the individual to transform themselves more morally and politically. I think that might be, at least in part, I think I hear you say, and I think I'm convinced by your approach.
Yeah, because another way that Baldwin, I'm sorry, because I know a lot of people have already heard me say this because I've been talking about this essay nonstop, but yeah, I rediscovered the essay, The Creative Process, and the way he says it, I was really inspired by this, but the way he says it is like first of all, he basically says, man was made not just to conquer the physical world. Man was made to conquer the wilderness of himself. And I don't know, there's just something within that I think is related to what we're talking about. And then at the end, he says, we've moved beyond the old world concepts. And this is important, the old world concepts of race, caste, and class. And he's saying like, we perhaps, well, he basically, I can probably turn to it fast, but he says, this nation is the strongest of the Western nations, not for what we think it is. We are the strongest nation in the Western world, but this is not for the reasons that we think. It is because we have an opportunity which no other nation has, of moving beyond the old world concepts of race and class and caste, and create finally what we must have had in mind when we first began speaking of the new world. But the price for this is a long look backward whence we came, in an unflinching assessment of the record. For an artist, the record of that journey is most clearly revealed in the personalities of the people the journey produced. Societies never know it, but the war of an artist with his society is a lover's war, and he does at his best what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation, make freedom real. Yeah.
I feel like this may be like a crude way of saying it, or just rephrasing what you're saying too. But part of what Baldwin does is he turns. It's like he makes it possible for every person to become like a site of, in a way that I think is a lot more challenging with Du Bois and King, because I think it's a lot easier to externalize Du Bois and King for different reasons. Although I think like obviously, a lot of, I mean, I feel like it's still a lot of like our own kind of like even our internal, like our interior life is kind of, I feel like I have Du Bois and King in it, but like I do think that like I agree with you. It's that it's like also part of what Baldwin does is it's almost like I still see it in some ways. Like part of what he's able to do is like how he also understood nonviolence, which was to take the battle into the human heart.
Right.
And I think that like the unique genius of Baldwin is to like understand that like that is an integral and inescapable part of the revolutionary process that must happen in American society.
Right.
And that was also the genius with which he recognized what King was doing and what the Black Freedom Movement was doing. And I feel like part of what's interesting is like what happens when that battle of the human heart, which Baldwin brings into your interior, what happens when that becomes a social problem.
Yes.
Which is part of what we're doing with like community groups, like the events. But yeah, it's almost like I think there's a really important question about like Baldwin's method and like what he's actually doing. And like I feel like we're just starting to get hold of it.
Wait, I wanted to go back to what you were saying before about categorical thinking, and this is something that we've gone back and forth on because there is a certain value to thinking in terms of categories because without that, and also important to choose your categories correctly, but I agree with what everybody, and Doc said this first, but I agree with what this conversation is also bringing out, is that Baldwin is not a categorical thinker.
Yeah.
And then if you talk about race, race as a category might not make sense. Maybe it's a false category, but racism still exists. You see it every day, and the color line is a real thing. And what I'm trying to say also about what you were saying about Du Bois and King, that the different quality. But I think about this, it comes back to me every single time I think about the Indian freedom struggle, and I think of Gandhi and the evolution of Gandhi as a leader of this vast mass of people And there was no theory of how the Indian struggle would be taken forward. The Congress at that time before Gandhi came, it was more a collection of moderates. It was about policy, like, we're going to make incremental progress towards home rule and so on and so forth. But Gandhi's evolution begins in South Africa, in direct confrontation with the color line. And Du Bois explains that, So what I'm also trying to get at, and, I don't know how to piece all of this together, is I think it's very valuable what we're saying about what Baldwin is uniquely able to do for this moment, and especially because the question of the interior life, because of so much focus on the individual, there is so much focus in our time on the individual and the individual's connection with struggle or to the world. Baldwin has this special, unique role where he takes the struggle to the realm of the individual personality. And I think with the idea of the complementarity, I think what I think it brings those two pieces together for me, where they're indispensable historically in the production of something that could be a universal theory for this moment, because you do need the world. You need to understand my own life, in the context of what whiteness can do to it, but then also your own life in the context of the larger world, multi-civilizational world, and where that stands. So yeah, I was just thinking about that. But this categorical thinking, I don't know if I'm fully clear on, because often it's very useful to, but then obviously Baldwin is not doing that. But what does that produce? The push and pull between those two tendencies.
Just to bring Winston into this, like I think about the contradiction of the Black worker. And this is all stuff I remember from Dot, that who are these people in this land, America, where when you struggle for their freedom, it's a paradox and inevitably leads to everybody else's freedom, like LGBTQ rights or immigration. And it reminds me of what Doc said about the freedom from society versus the freedom to transform society. I think everybody in the school has been confronting their interior life, because that will produce the person who decides to make a moral choice between whiteness and freedom from society and joining the Black freedom struggle, which is the freedom to transform society.
Yeah.
And I know Doc went to a bar with my mom and dad recently, and my mom said to him, "Why did you send Samir to the mosque?" And what'd you say, Doc? He said, "I had nothing to do with it." Or what'd you say? And I said, I told my mom, "Yeah, that was my choice to go to mosque number 12." and yeah, Eddie and I saw Minister Rodney on Thursday, and he was doing community engagement. And but anyway, who are these people in this country? The only people with the freedom to create a new religion. The only people who are those in America has gatherings like that. In South Philadelphia. Just people getting around to talk about freedom. It's more than just religion.
Yeah.
It's a social organization whose purpose is to liberate. But it's also the Black proletariat. So whenever the Nation of Islam is fighting for Black freedom, they're producing freedom for everybody else. And that's the contradiction.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm just inspired by what you said.
Yeah, part of what I'm trying to make sense of is the imperative of the nonviolent method. And like basically this thing of if the departure point is now like the interior life, like transforming yourself in order to transform the world. Like I'm trying to understand. basically I'm trying to make sense of the way that Baldwin takes up like, the nonviolent method in the Black freedom movement and then deploys it in once again like a new iteration where well, I feel like it's almost valuable because the nonviolent method was then able to be sustained even once the structure of the Black freedom movement itself had dissolved. Like Baldwin was a transformed nonconformist. And I feel like I don't know if it's always been this way, but I just feel like there's a heightened importance now on like you have to be there's actually no way to change America unless you become that transformed nonconformist. Like why is that the imperative? Like why is the interior life, this question of the interior life or the moral choice more heightened than it was 100 years ago is what I'm making sense of. But also connected to what I think what you had said, it also made me think about the end of Take Me to the Water, I think, when he talks about like one of the reverends from the South in particular, and he said it was by looking at the choices that this reverend was making that I realized like how private of a choice nonviolence was and how difficult of a choice it could be. And in another essay, he says something related, which is about how like the intangible dreams, he's talking about the interior life, like the intangible dreams and ideas of people have a very concrete effect on the world. Like there's something I'm trying to connect there, but I mean, I just know for myself, I came up in a time where if you were not transformed, like you could do no right, and everything you did had an ounce of compromise in it. And as a young person, like I could pick up on that really easily. So like I saw it in my professors for sure. But it kind of boggled me. Like I feel like it's rare for people to go all the way, right? But just this thing of the transformed nonconformist and how I feel like Baldwin provides a way to become that. Yeah, but then also this thing about how revolutionaries look so much like artists. And I don't know if it was the same 100 years ago. I mean, Du Bois, but even what you're describing with the creative process. But he says it again and again. He makes this formulation like the role of the artist is the same as the role of the lover. Like it's very interesting. Or he has another where he says, "True rebels are as rare as true lovers, and to mistake a fever for a passion in either case can destroy one's life." To mistake a fever for a passion can destroy one's life. Well, the important line is true rebels are as rare as true lovers. And in either case, to mistake a fever for a passion can destroy one's life. He's saying they're rare. The artist, the revolutionary, the lover is rare. True love is rare in America, but tapped into what it is, it's revolutionary.
In some ways, I can understand. I mean, I can't say, I hear you all, but I think you all probably have a bit of a different relationship to Baldwin than I have.
Yeah.
And I think you all have a romantic relationship, and I mean by romantic and romantic love relationship with him. You know, he's kind of your lover, your ideal. And I frankly, I just don't have that same relationship to him. I'm not saying I don't want to, but I don't feel the same way. Yeah, I just stopped there.
Wait, Doc, what do you mean by that?
Listening to them, they have a different relationship to Baldwin than I do.
Interesting.
And the things that they draw upon, for example, Emily and I are in the same reading group. We'll come back to that in a minute, but what the things that you all draw upon are always when Baldwin talks about the revolutionary as a lover, or lovers. That's very, it seems important. to y'all's relationship with Baldwin. I don't necessarily, I don't think I do feel him that way. For example, just in our reading group, if you remember, we were to be baptized, and we're the part where he's talking about Malcolm. We were reading the part where he was talking about Malcolm X on Thursday, and he was talking about how gentle Malcolm was. He was not at all what the mass media had portrayed him as, but I don't think he would have referred to Malcolm in the terms in terms that would suggest relationship of a lover. For example, maybe this is a little far out, but I could not imagine, or I don't think I could see Baldwin talking about Malcolm X in the terms that he would talk of a lover. For example, when he talked about Eldridge Cleaver, the artist, and I forget now, but he talked about Eldridge Cleaver in ways, and talked to Eldridge Cleaver in ways that he did not talk about or talk to Malcolm X. And he deployed the language of lovers when talking about talking about Eldridge Cleaver. He did not use that, as I remember, when he spoke about Malcolm X. I'm trying to figure myself in relationship to Baldwin, but I do feel there's a certain difference in how you all, it might be gender, I don't know, but you all draw upon things that I don't draw upon. Does that make sense?
I don't think you're right.
You don't think I'm right?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, because the quote I read was about like the creative process. Like, for example, what I'm emphasizing is that I think Baldwin is explaining something about the American Revolutionary process. Or maybe I'm also misunderstanding what you mean by romantic. But I don't think I view Baldwin romantically. Because I think Baldwin is saying something, although I do think that we have a different relationship to Baldwin, which I have noticed. But I just don't think it's true that I don't think that I have a romantic.
That's a question. When Baldwin talks about, when he uses as an example, even as a metaphor, for different things, with Eldridge Cleaver, the relationship of the artists to the people is like the relationship of lovers. And if you love something, you be truthful. If you love someone, you be truthful with them. And other things that I don't remember that you all say. It seems to me that you all are drawn to his metaphor of lovers and romantic lovers, intimate lovers, not agape love. Lovers. But metaphorically he uses it, but almost as an example of that struggle.
Okay, interesting.
If you know what I'm saying, the struggle of lovers, the struggle of the artists with the people.
Right. Okay.
Even or when he talks about, when he says in that documentary to the young person, I didn't know you loved me, but I didn't think you would ever know that I love you. Now he's not talking romantically, but there is the romantic love aspect of it. A lot of, I don't want to get into details. But a lot of times part of the struggle in a romantic or intimate relationship is that I never thought you would love me or know how much I love you.
Right.
That's a trope in all romantic dramas, the struggle of lovers, and Baldwin is always, I mean, almost sometimes, it's a little bit embarrassing for me because I don't think like that necessarily.
Okay. Yeah.
And, the struggle
I know
of
what you're saying.
lovers,
Yeah.
now you're getting deep into the personal life. But
Yeah.
that's the most,
I understand.
what I'm saying? That's one of the most difficult things even to talk about.
Yeah.
And if you talk about, and Du Bois was so, chaste that he would never
Right.
be so openly
Right.
talk about such a thing as lovers.
I think I'm more shook that you are not more romantic, actually.
Yeah.
Because in our reading group, I understand. I agree. I know what you're saying. That's what I disagreed with. I was like, well, I actually think we're similar. But I agree, we're actually not similar.
No, we're not in this
Because
respect.
you just never exposed it to me until now.
No. But I actually, I mean, to be for real about it, when Baldwin talks like that, I get a little bit kind of embarrassed. I don't want to,
Oh.
yeah. The whole idea of lover.
Right.
I mean, that,
I know what you
that,
mean.
that's not a public thing. I keep it
Right.
to the extent
Right.
that I engage myself
Well,
with it.
because in our reading
I go
group,
personal.
yeah, because in our reading,
I go.
yeah, political.
In
Yeah, I know.
not political. Private. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
But
because
keep the private. That's where I go.
oh yeah, well, because even in our reading group, that's why I guess that's why you followed up. Because in our reading group, my greatest example of a complex society in America is a complex society, and how you cannot be afraid of the complexity, because then you inherently misunderstand yourself plus society and will never change it. Is the example of something that should be quote unquote, I guess people disagree with me on this, but something that should be decently straightforward is like attraction or desire. Like we were talking about this in our reading group, and I gave the example that attraction or desire becomes loaded in America because of the race, because of basically race. And I gave the example of having a white ex-boyfriend, like, or a white lover, right? Something, it's not just, I can't just be like, oh, I have a lover. It's going to be like, your lover's a white man. So what does that say about me? Like, there's so many layers of questions. Something that should be straightforward is complex. And I remember Doc was like, wow, you really like went open about
You're
it.
transparent. No, and I complimented you because in that sense, I feel that I mean, it's like, I mean, in our reading group, she's always, very brutally open and honest. I'm Chinese and I'm,
Oh, yeah.
but
Oh, yeah. I was like, I thought I was inferior to white people.
yeah. But I think in a lot of ways, you're more Baldwinian than I am.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Because he talks openly and brutally openly like that. And
That's interesting.
I think he considers it his responsibility as a witness
yes.
to be that open.
And she's very much like that in our reading group. And I'm not like that in free school or nowhere else.
Really?
I
I don't expose myself.
I think it does tie a little bit into how he considers, how he looks at safety. Because I think
There you go.
because I was listening to I don't remember exactly what I listened to. He was saying that, like, somebody was asking him about Giovanni's room and about how this sort of brought about the fact that he was a homosexual man. And he said, yeah, I said it, but I told you. Nobody had to come and tell me. I
Right.
told the world
Yeah,
before
yeah,
anybody
right.
else.
But I wasn't hiding anything. Yeah, that's
Yeah, so I think, and then I think that highlights his position on what he considers to be a world that you have to navigate with the notion that you are never safe.
But Gus, this is very interesting. because Baldwin felt to be a witness, to be this person who would reveal the truth of the society, he had to be completely transparent. He couldn't hide anything. And he really does, man. You know, and if you're a private person, you get a little, you know, you feel a certain way, man. God damn, he's telling everything. You feel something.
No, I do. I mean, we were reading this essay for the podcast, this the American freaks and the American ideal of manhood.
Yeah.
And in it, he goes into great detail about how he, had these relationships with people who were very mean to him, and then when they were alone, they would approach him and say, "Hey, come to bed with me," and so open, so open about all of that. And I think that those experiences, those formative years of his life, actually made him a way to, so that when he grew up and started writing, it's like, I'm going to be very open about this. Love is something I will never ever shy away from, or
Do you remember in the reading group at
making words.
Making Worlds? Remember the young woman Mina?
Because you've talked about her so much.
Yeah. Oh man, I wish she would hang out with Free School more. She's a young woman, only 23, I think, who had a serious nervous breakdown, but super brilliant from Tamil Nadu and southern India. But she loved Baldwin for the same reasons y'all love Baldwin. Remember what she was saying? Remember what she was saying, Samir? That yeah, I don't know what the heck.
I would say there's a little bit of a difference.
Oh, really? Tell me what you said.
Yeah, that's
Well,
Help me out.
She said that she liked Baldwin. She was just in the shop and she heard us reading Baldwin.
No, but she knew about the reading group, but she didn't, because of her, I don't know, whatever. She was roaming around right outside, but she knew about the reading group because she saw
a poster, yeah.
She saw the poster. I'm sorry.
She liked it because it was therapeutic
Right.
about her breakup from her white girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah. That was part of it.
Right.
That was part of it.
Yeah.
But, well, she's an Indian. What did and she loves Baldwin. Wasn't that? She loves Baldwin. And when she read from she read the shit out of that, man. So she knows, very intelligent, but how does she recover herself? Be it the breakup with her white girlfriend or whatever, but it's something that she is recovering. You could see, and she wasn't hiding anything. She had a breakdown. She didn't even finish college yet because of that, and which it hurt. My heart went out because I'm saying I hope her mother or father somewhere near because she might need somebody. You know what I'm saying? But that's another thing. But it's like the same Baldwin that you all talk about. That a Baldwin who can soothe the pain of the heart.
Well,
You know what I'm saying?
I thought but that's what I thought we were
If you ever had a broken heart.
So, Emily, when you were reading the role of the artist as a
Ain't
lover's
talk
war
about-
to reveal the beloved to himself, that's what I understood you to be saying. Like, if Baldwin is my lover, he's my lover because he reveals me to myself. That new identity that you were trying to reach for and understand. He reveals me to myself as a lover does.
Sorry.
Wait, but hold it. But he's saying what I'm trying to say.
That's what I kind of.
Yeah, no, you saying.
No, he's saying what I'm saying.
Yeah, but why did you rejected what I said?
Rescinded my rejection. By 70%.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I don't know. It's just that one-dimensional like thing of like, well, they're whatever. Because I think like what is true is something about the revolutionary and like what it means at all to attempt to change, be changed. Yeah, I think it is true. I think we do need new language, or like, or at least better understand what we're trying to say. Because I think it's a matter for me because, and I'm trying to get my words together. Because my brain, I know, has changed a lot, like with my self-consciousness or like how I conceive of myself. Um, and what matters about that is the contextualization, like in what place and for what do I find myself in and then doing. In society, that's one, and like the historical constitution. I know that I don't particularly see Baldwin as somebody outside of me. So I wouldn't say that he's my lover, for instance. Like I wouldn't be like, I would be like Baldwin is me. Or like Baldwin is like at a deeper, he help. It's not even like a help, but his conception conceives like that makes me who I am. Like I can understand the world because of how he saw the world. He taught me how to see, or something like that. And I would say that because, like, I don't. I think the whole point of thinking of, or like what you had talked about between like the subject and the social and the like self, like the soul, basically, like that kind of triadic thing, right? Then you're also thinking less about, like, this is also in consideration of the conversation that we had before about the individual and his, whatever. But you also recognize something about the dimensions of a person as historically constituted, as politically configured, as, morally conceived, philosophically, like all the choices that you make to think or decide upon what you do are involved in relationships, whether they be romantic or not. The baseline is that the baseline, meaning the standard of that relationship, is also equivalent to the level of honesty or the level of being able to drive to a certain core that really makes you at all human, but also you, meaning like your political, historical, and moral responsibility, which is your revolutionary, the revolutionary responsibility. And I only say it like that because I think that's only the best word to describe something about the prophetic, something about how, and I'm trying to make a point that who I am matters if I use it, if I know who I am. Meaning like the aspect of the revolutionary describes something about how you can become, or how, what we're saying, we can become a new nation, make it really what it is. Because I think that it's one thing where people will be like, oh, well, what are you doing? How is it possible? to achieve something different in society. And then there's the fact that, well, I know that Shakespeare did not just like, or I know that the many great people that make up our civilization in our mind did not just like were not recognized because they didn't recognize there are certain acts that they needed to do, like certain I'm talking about like whomever we think of as great, like Oedipus or Shakespeare, and the point being is that, like, for me, I think that it is true. This is to say something simple, or to say something in a simple way. With Du Bois, there is an acknowledgement of the historical and civilizational purpose. I think with Baldwin, like, there's a way to realize, meaning that whomever people are, or wherever it is that they come from, they can achieve their certain potential. And the achieving of it would only happen really through a complex, or like through what we call it as love, or through the struggle to love at all. And I think that that's what makes the whole thing less about a sexual and romantic kind of relationship. But the point is that when you are in these relationships, you are forced to struggle to become ultimately different and new, which I think maybe in this country, that is the only way we've experienced it, which is, something to say about ourselves. But the point is for us to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
That's not, yeah.
Oh,
No.
because I was thinking about this, Michelle, when you were talking about King and his relationship to Baldwin, but I didn't know where to bring it in. But we've been reading Pilgrimage to Nonviolence and put Just Above My Head on pause on Mondays. And I think that's really helped me understand this, where if we're trying to figure out how Baldwin well bridges the subject and the object, or the subject and the interior and the exterior, it seems like that is in the Kinnean sense of love as a force that breaks down boundaries between myself and the other person or the rest of society, of the love force that he talks about.
I just get the sense also on this question, you said the sexual and the romantic. Can there be a romantic relationship that's not sexual?
Yeah.
Because I think that Baldwin's life, at a certain point, he had many loves, but I don't know how sexual he was, for all kind of reasons. But
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting only.
yeah. So when he talks about, like lovers, we're like lovers. I don't know what it all means. I don't know what he's meaning by
Yeah.
It's a certain responsibility.
okay, probably that too. Or the responsibility of lovers to one another, and certainly as he takes seriously himself as a lover, he takes seriously his responsibilities.
Oh.
Yeah, I think the other, the kind of sister essay to a creative process is the artist's struggle for integrity,
Oh, okay.
where I think he goes a little bit.
She doesn't accept.
Yeah, no,
She.
that's true. I mean, I used to think about that too, but actually it's
Stop using your powers for bad.
true.
No, I think that he goes in a little bit of detail about what the role and responsibility of. I think of it this way because I read them both together at the same time, and I got a lot of the same things, and one sort of made up for the other. But the other thing that I was thinking about is this question of Du Bois and Baldwin. And this is something that I've had in my mind for quite a while, and I might be absolutely wrong about this. But the way that I think about Du Bois is that he starts from a social historical perspective. He starts with, say, the black proletariat in a period of time in society and history. And then he goes on to describe that period, that society, and then you get a glimpse, an inside view into the life world of. Then you get a glimpse into the life world of the people of the black proletariat and of that of the class. Whereas from what I've read of Baldwin, Baldwin starts from the black proletarian imaginary. He starts from the child, and more specifically the black child, and what are the forces that shape him? What forms him? And through that, and he always places a very personal point of view. Like he said, what I'm talking about is me.
Yeah.
And if you can see yourself in me, then you understand the rest of it. And the rest of it, like, so he branches out from himself and his personal experience to society. And what I'm trying to
That's what about.
and what I'm trying to say is that I think that Du Bois has a way of coming from history to the individual, and Baldwin has a way of going from the individual outward to history. And when you compare these two kind of epistemologies, you can expect that one or the other would miss out on certain aspects. And so when you bring them together, you sort of complete it. That's the way that I've been trying to think about it.
I think it's going to be, I know Jerry asked me to write an article for Avant-Garde on this. I think it's going to be more difficult than I thought at first.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to say is, well, interestingly, just on a personal note, I feel like the way that I related to Baldwin and have related to him is actually, I was thinking about it and I relate to him more in a Christian way, funny enough, where it's almost like reading Baldwin, it's a very confessional thing. But
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think part of what I'm trying to get at, and this is also dealing with like avant-garde in the next issue, is I think there's Baldwin also through his mode of thinking and through his methodology. It's like he offers a kind of criteria for revolutionary thinking and especially writing, I think, which is, I think there's one way to look at it where it's like you could say like, oh, revolutionary theory and revolutionary writing means that you have to like take what's happening in the world, synthesize it, like classify it, like turn it into like categories, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
But I feel like the Baldwinian mode, it's almost like he's not doing that a lot. It's more like the criteria is whether or not you can actually pierce through reality, and like pierce through people. And I feel like that's kind of, in some ways, like a revolutionary path. Baldwin uniquely offers to like this generation of people who want to be revolutionaries in this time. It's not about whether or not you can be like, oh, I'm really smart and I can like basically boil down what's happening in the world into like kind of like these distinct categorical, like I don't know, systems. But it's more about like whether or not like can you pierce through something, like can you pierce through reality and can you reach reality that way. But yeah, I do think also the Du Bois Baldwin thing is really, like Shantanu was saying, like I've been thinking about it since the science symposium, and each distinctly it's almost like the journey that they go through as thinkers. I think that itself is important, and like where they start from and like what they move towards, like. I think that like I agree with that. There's a complementary nature to that, like the different journeys.
Okay, well, that was a great conclusion. Unless people want to read comments. No, okay, no comments.
Oh, comments, yes, I'm sorry.
No comments. Sorry, no comments.
Why not?
Because we're done.
We don't have that many, do we?
There are a lot of comments.
No.
Please, Michelle.
Okay, I'll read them fast.
Okay, read them fast, read them fast.
Where did we stop? Where did we stop, Mary? Last 30. Okay, you're a media breaking down. Good morning. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. 12:25. Okay. Cody, there's a lot from Cody. Zionism is heavy in the Midwest church, but probably all over the USA. A good book is Pagans in the Promised Land, the concept of pilgrims crossing the Shining Sea to arrive at the city on the hill. I think he's talking about, okay, whatever. Bombalai 7. I don't know what in response this is, but he says simplify it, condense it. It's imperialism. Let's see. Okay, Cody talks about whiteness. I think it's just looking the concept of whiteness in the eye and rolling back legislation here and there to even things out and pave old hatreds and fears. They deleted reparations language from it and also added language saying the 1968 Civil Rights Act doesn't apply on reservations for indigenous peoples. Don DeBar says, exactly, Doc, the existing ruling elites of the West.
The what?
The existing ruling elites of the West. I'm not really
existing
sure.
what of
The existing ruling elites.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Cody says being bold enough to study the concept of whiteness may be a thing in itself. All we do on the reservation is hang out too. Haha. I think racism isn't thinking so and so people are all bad. It's acting like it for land and resources. Interesting. Bombalai 7 says the true righteous people of the earth like to hang out. The others want to steal from those hanging out. The professor's telling y'all that walking the truth is different than talking the truth. I agree with your analysis. Cody says when the people in charge of hiring are faking a hypermorality, their workers might feel compelled to fake it till they make it too. I'm on the Baldwin side a little more, but appreciate both. And he's talking about Du Bois Baldwin. I think if the land gets shared more equally, the white fear will go away. The first step is to crack that rock, to release the gem, so to speak. Get the hope for a landlord upset. Divvy that up among the races and bye-bye race. So it seems like very land-based. Baldwin speaks more down to earth than the white intellectual audience. Baldwin speaks more down to earth that the white intellectual audience from college could broadcast back when people like him got on TV. It's hard to face the fact that white middle-class people have always, quote-unquote, saved people of color through legislation and their voting numbers after seeing and hearing a great people of color POC rights orator. Still, Du Bois can deal with the legal facts of federal blood quantum and one-drop rules, sundown towns. Du Bois can talk to congressmen. Baldwin can talk to the everyman. Mm-hmm. Romanus Pontifex of the Columbus days said to go forth and dominate every non-Christian, even the animals, and give the lands of the infidel savage heathen to the vicar of Christ. Kind of manifest. Patrick, a new commenter, says, the mask has come off. The whole shell game has been revealed. It's obvious that Biden was always a puppet for these interests who are hiding behind him. Now it's all being exposed. And then Cody says, romantic relationships as they pertain politically to the USA and the way it treats people of color is akin to battered spouts, where the white concept people gaslight us for genocide and poverty. Oh, okay. So, okay, well, thanks for all of our active commentators. We will be back next week, July 7th, for free school. We'll still be here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we will not stop for the July 4th holiday. We'll be here on July 6th, Saturday, July 6th.
Yeah.
Okay, so bye.